All right, folks, welcome. Today on All Minus One, we're going to talk about how we're pathologizing the West. We're going to talk about all the fake news, the econ, all that fun stuff, as well as the tricks of the trade. The econ. Look, I did it again. Anyways, guys, we're right around on the other side of the intro. All right, welcome everybody. This is All Minus One, and my name is Bill. Thank you for joining me today. The weather is really, really beautiful out today in my area. It was yesterday too. It's been a scorcher, incredibly hot, in the 90s and very, very humid. Um, so 90-degree weather in high humidity is terrible. It's not like the dry heat of the desert where even at 120, 130 degrees, it sucks, but you can breathe. In any case, the last 2 days though, today and yesterday have been quite beautiful, like around 70, good breeze going, actually kind of cool in the evening. So hopefully you all are getting out. And if you're not watching this now live, you'll watch it later. But I want to get into some topics that I've been pressing on. I've been talking about the synthetic society, and I am currently literally writing a book on these ideas, or a booklet or something of that. I'm going to try and keep it pretty brief because I want it to be not so much detailed, but mimetic, right? And with that, I want to restate, as I don't always state, the purpose of this show, and it is specifically me trying to figure out what makes good and strong societies, good, strong people, good, strong moral character, all of those things. Now, I believe that God has to be a center and a focus of your life for that. But I will concede to those who don't believe in such forces and try to at least understand that those ideas of God and about God are at least psychologically correct. They're at least correct in the way that we act and function in the world, whether you believe that they are true or not. And again, the real purpose is to see what makes our societies strong or weak. And we live in a really weak, horrifying society right now. It's utterly, the masses are just utterly lost. They are all a bunch of lost sheep. In any case, before I get into it, now I've been, the show's been going on for 7 minutes now because the 4-minute intro I have. If you aren't aware, there are multiple streaming services I use: DLive, Entropy, Rumble, and YouTube. So if you're on, let's say, YouTube, and you're not a big fan of YouTube, you can go to those other places. Both Entropy and Rumble allow you to donate as well. Entropy is a free speech site. Anything you say there will not be recorded for all of posterity, right? Spook says, as a person who lives in the dry heat of the desert, breathing is said dry air is effing painful, man, especially also dusty, which it can almost always be. Yeah. Well, the sandstorms is another issue, but trust me, man, when I came back from Iraq and used to the 130-degree weather, and I got off the plane in North Carolina and Cherry Point, I literally gasped for air when walking into the 85-degree freaking swampy, air. It was bad. It was a huge difference. So, in any case, let me tab through here real quick. So the first thing I wanted to start with today, we're going to talk about some news, as I generally do, and some perspectives, but we're going to have a lot of videos today. And the first thing that I want to talk about is Joshua Slocum and his Disaffected podcast. And I didn't even know about his channel. Maybe I'd seen it before, but I caught him on trigonometry, and it was right after last week, or not last week. I didn't stream last week, but the week before, when I was talking about how we are pathologizing people. We are creating these cluster B personality disorders. And I started with Amber Heard and, of course, expanded out from there. So we're going to watch, I don't know what a clip, 10 or 15 minutes of this. And of course, we'll interrupt and add context and whatever else. But it's an important thing. And I ask you to, if you like what he has to say, to go check out his podcast. Of course, Trigonometry is a great show as well. So without further ado, let's do it.
Hello and welcome to Trigonometry. I'm Francis Foster.
I'm Konstantin Kisin.
And this is a show for you if you want honest conversations with fascinating people.
Our brilliant guest today is the host of the Disaffected podcast, Josh Slocum. Welcome to Trigonometry.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.
It's a great pleasure to have you on. We've been trying to make it happen for a long time, and we're delighted we've finally been able to to make it work. For anyone who doesn't know who you are, tell everybody, who are you? How are you where you are? What has been your journey through life that leads you to be sitting here talking to us?
Well, as you said, I host a weekly podcast called Disaffected. Well, I say weekly, we do it a television show on Sundays and audio during the week. And it's a show that looks at modern culture and politics through a psychological lens. I am not a mental health professional. I'm not a credentialed professional. I don't represent myself as one, but I'm somebody who has personal experience with domestic abuse, family abuse, and mental illness.
And so that makes him an expert of sorts, right? He is a, as the saying goes, an armchair philosopher on this, right? But then he's also read the literature. That's really important. This is the first thing people try to do when they want to silence you and cut you down. They gaslight you by saying you don't know anything about the subject. Well, I'm sorry, folks, but if you live through this stuff, such as I have, and you then read about it and you try to understand what is going on, you're going to have a great deal more knowledge than someone who actually generally sits in a clinical setting, unless they are around these people all the time. That's all they do. It's all they study. But in the clinical setting, you are getting a veneer of a person because they're not, they know what's going on. And it's going to be hard for them to manipulate the counselor or psychologist or psychiatrist. It's not going to be so simple for them as it is for someone who has a personal relationship with them. And cluster B people are chameleons. They are very charming, and they are very enticing and very seductive. So all of this needs to be understood, which is why they are able to continue to have a slew of victims over the course of their lifetime. They know how to draw in people. But as I mentioned to you in the past, you'll see not only do they have a long history of hurting people, but they also have a long history of broken relationships. Point in case, Amber Heard had no one to come and testify for her except for her sister, who she allegedly has abused and abuses often, so much so that her sister was on a reality TV show that the girls on the TV show were asking her how she got a black eye, and it was from her sister. Again, reality TV, not really real, part of the synthetic society, of course, but hard to say, because hard to say, right? Spook wants to know what theory of atonement I believe. Well, I'll get to that, Spook, here in a bit, but essentially, what I can tell you is that the theories of atonement changed over the course of Christianity, and the original is what I believe in. The penal substitution theory, but I decided to ask you directly. I wouldn't tell. I could not classify or tell you off of the top of my head the different names theologically that these things have, but it's simple when I speak to you about the perspective from the early Christian church. There are two kingdoms. Is the kingdom of God and the kingdom of Satan. Adam sold his birthright of the kingdom of God for the kingdom of Satan. Satan rules the earth. Satan and his minions, the princes and principalities of the air. In fact, I've been watching a lot of demonology stuff and angelology stuff recently, and was thinking about doing a show on it. Again, the psychological perspectives that we think about things running in the background, let's say an abused person such as myself, or some things, like if I start getting in a certain situation, I might start shutting down and not realizing, right? Well, the comparison is that the different spirits, the different personalities, these principles, these principalities would be influencing you, right? But within that, without getting too far off into the weeds, what we have is we have God, who is holy, meaning he is separate from everyone else. He stands out and away, and he is pure. And to be in his presence means that you also must be so, or you can't be around them. You're stinky. It's like, let somebody in your house who got sprayed by a skunk. You're probably not going to do it. But the bondage to sin and death is the bondage to Satan. So when Christ died, he didn't die to some vengeful, wrathful God who murdered him to atone for the sins of all these other people. That's not what happened at all. That is a twisting of the scriptures. It came about much later, and it is it makes God evil, and it's a farce. What Christ did is he died to Satan, because, see, Satan tempted him and offered him all the kingdoms of the earth, right? Because Satan is the king of the earth. This is why I don't believe in basically monarchy or political bodies or anything. And the Justinians, that is the Orthodox Christians who follow the Church of Justinian from Constantinople, because that's what they're following. They look at that period and they go, oh no, this is how monarchy is supposed to work with God and da 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 da. Perhaps, but everything in the Bible points to God wanting us to be free and to have only one king, and that is Him. So now I know you being a Muslim, you don't quite understand the significance of God being a human being, making himself a human being, or that human beings are in the image of God, are imagers of God more specifically. But then that would derail my entire show to get into all that. But essentially, the payment for your bondage from that slavery was Christ's death. And because he cannot be held down in death, because he is God himself and he resurrected, then that we are supposed to live out as well and be free in him. And that's how, we live in unity with Christ. This is a deep theological thing. So I will have to do another show on it. But the best example in literature of this is C.S. Lewis's The Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe. Aslan sacrificed himself to the White Witch to save the children. That is what Christ did. Okay, all other theories are wrong. Okay, I'm just telling you, they're wrong. They came about later, they're not incorrect, and they change the meaning of things. And that's the problem with how the church doesn't care about its roots. It cares about innovations. It cares about staying relevant and powerful. And that is the false church. Pretty simple, because what the church is, the ecclesia, is the assembly. It's just the people in Christ. So there's the assembly in Christ, and then there's everything else that claim to be the assembly of Christ. And I've talked about this before too. But anyways, let's get to the subject matter after that little derailing there.
That it affected my family's life. And I've begun to believe that the kinds of distorted dynamics, lack of emotional control, narcissistic exploitation that are common to abusive family backgrounds has been spilling out and infecting our public culture to such a degree that it alarmed me enough that is the focus of the show that I'm on, or that I host, rather.
Well, it's fascinating, because I've always said, from the moment that we saw some of these ideologies start to play themselves out, someone who's done a lot of personal development stuff and learned psychology at university and all that sort of thing, it was kind of obvious to me that, excuse me, a lot of the stuff seems to be people projecting their own personal traumas onto the world. Like, I had a bad experience with my dad, therefore all men are evil, or I had this, therefore
Yes.
all that. Is that the kind of thing that you talk about?
Yeah, what we talk about, what I focus on are what are called cluster B personality disorders, and the tactics and abuse dynamics that attend to those. So yeah, it involves a lot of things like projection of your own trauma onto the world, victim signaling in order to get virtue points. I mean, we've all talked about all of this stuff, and it's interesting to me because I think that when you talk about projection, for example, projection is something that all humans do, but it's something that has become, I guess, sort of excessively popular in the internet age and in the past 5 to 10 years. And it's also something that, interestingly, people have said when they watch a show like the one I do, where I talk about my personal background in my family with people with personality disorders. And I liken them to, I mean, what you can call it woke if you want, you can call it the successor ideology, whatever term it is that you're comfortable with. This cultural moment that we're living in right now seems to me to be characterized by an excess of clinical levels of narcissism, dysfunctional levels of narcissism, projection of internal rage onto other people.
Now, to add to this, we all see this, we all know, we all understand the idea of projection. It's when someone does something themselves or is involved in a behavior themselves and claims that you are doing that very behavior. This most prominently comes up with cluster B types as a form, again, of gaslighting. You get accused of the thing that they are doing themselves. For instance, a cluster B person with borderline is likely to have affairs. Doesn't mean that they all have affairs, but cluster B personality disorders in general tend to have high sexual promiscuity, and borderline people tend to be very promiscuous and have affairs quite often. And so they would then have an affair and then gaslight you and saying, I think you're having an affair on me, blah, 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 blah. And if you were to ever accuse them of having an affair, again, it would be the same thing. And then they would turn around, like if you thought you had evidence or something, they would immediately turn around and go, oh, you must be having an affair if you think I'm having blah, 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 blah. You've always done this and this and that. You know, that's the kind of behavior he's talking about. And we see this all the time. We see this in the delusion of how the left perceives the people on the right, the majority of which just wish to be left alone. And what is the right? Well, the right is anyone the right is anyone right of Mao. The right is anyone who is not in the revolution. The right is anyone who is not willing to groom people, who is not willing to be on the left side of history. Of course, they say the right side of history. I'm going to start calling it the left side of history. Anyone who does not believe in the prophecies of Karl Marx and is helping to bring about the utopia, you're right wing, period. This is how the leftists think. And of course, that is psychotic. That's black and white, borderline personality disorder type thinking. That's what a borderline person, that's how they operate. You know, a minute ago, I was just talking about Christianity. There's a lot of black and white in Christianity, of course, but my religious operation also has certain barriers and boundaries within that, right? For instance, judgment. Judgment is a thing that Christians are supposed to do, but many modern Christians think they're not supposed to, because there's a line, well, several lines, but there's a line in the Bible, right? And in the Sermon on the Mount where Christ says, do not judge, right? He says, don't judge, for which measure you judge others, it will be measured back to you. What does that mean? It means be careful how you judge, how you cast your beliefs onto other people when you yourself have a plank in your own eye, as Christ put it. It doesn't mean you're not allowed to judge. It means you must be careful about your judgment and how you treat people. So if you have some sins that you wrestle with or something, then you should be less judgmental of people because of that. A person on the left who does the projection, right, will be ultra judgmental, right? A person with these personality disorders will be ultra judgmental about their own sins, but projected upon you. It's a weird thing, but it's a deflection that people do because they think that they're not going to get caught. And trust me, they get off on the manipulation. They really do. They enjoy it.
So yes, it is that sort of thing. And I think it might be helpful to tell people exactly what cluster B personality disorders
Yes.
are and why I talk about them. So when we're talking about mental illness, most people, when you use the term mental illness, most people think of things like severe depression, anxiety, maybe obsessive compulsive disorder, maybe something like schizophrenia, where a person is actually literally disconnected from reality. Personality disorders, if you want to call them a mental illness, are a somewhat different kind of mental illness. And I'm speaking in rough generalities. There is overlap here, but in general, you can see a person who might suffer from intermittent depression or intermittent anxiety, and you can think of it as kind of a dark cloud that comes in and may make a couple of weeks or a month in that person's life really tough and might make them hard company to be around. But it can be treated and it comes and goes. Personality disorders are not like that. They're basically what they say on the tin.
But there is treatment through cognitive behavior therapy if the person is willing to do it, meaning they learn how to think in a rational way and to see if they're thinking irrationally. This actually is what spurred, I believe, James Lindsay to start to understand the nature of the left. If I'm not mistaken, I believe he started learning about cognitive behavior therapy and realizing that the people on the left and their cultish-like behavior needed that, essentially. So again, this thing with the projection and all that, it is the because their personality itself, their spirit, their soul, right, is deranged because it's twisted. They literally view things twistedly. As an example with Amber Heard and Borderline, Johnny would walk away from fights. That triggers abandonment. And so she would chase him down. And it got worse and worse and worse. Amber Heard does think that Johnny Depp abused her. You know why? Because he left. That is abuse to her. That's a twisting of reality. Okay? You must understand that. You must understand that these people, they everything that goes on around them, people are always out to get them. Okay? It's very extreme. Nobody ever listens to them, and nobody, does this or that for them. Everybody seems to hate them. And quite often what you get with these people as well is the covert narcissism. You don't get the overt narcissism. I actually dated an overt narcissist once. I lived with her for a year. It was a bad time. It was not a good time. But they go around, the overt narcissist, and talk about how beautiful they are, how intelligent they are, how good they are at their job. And most of the time, you don't understand that they're actually making stories up and lying to you about their greatness. But what they do is they then wrap you along with that. So, I was in a very broken place. And, I just gotten out of this 7-year-long abusive relationship. I had no confidence. And here comes this pretty narcissist just to save me and make it everything worse. And so with that, I got a little bit of a confidence boost because, she would be like, she would tell me, "Oh, Bill, you're so handsome. You're, this and that. You're so smart." Da, da, da. And when you've been broken down, and you basically, what abuse is essentially, folks, is a sort of psychological torture, which is meant to break you down to then become enslaved by the person who's abusing you. Literally, like you become a slave to their will. And I'm kind of rebellious, so I don't like that. So despite going into deep depression and losing a lot of function in my life, right, for quite a long time, so it definitely affected me. I never quit fighting. I never gave up, right? And a lot of people will give up. They'll either completely break, like Theon Greyjoy and Game of Thrones. Oh, Reek. They'll either break or they'll commit suicide or they'll leave. It's really scary. It's really sad, but it happens. You once watched a video of a doc talking about how he helped a narcissist deconstruct their narcissism and basically cured them. Maybe, but what I would say is that the only real cure is the cure of the soul, right? You have to repent, which is a renewing of your mind, changing. I mean, I make no qualms about it. I was a really terrible person for a couple of years, for about 8 years after, and during, even with my ex, because you change. And I wasn't the most awful person ever per se, but I did a lot of stuff that, I'm not proud of, I'm not happy of, a lot of stupid things. And I got away from that because the pain was so deep for me that I couldn't embrace it anymore. And so then I fell to the ground and cried like a baby, and God restored me. I mean, that's basically what happened. There was a lot more to it. There's a lot more involved, but I went through a serious transformation. Like my outlook, everything changed like that. It just different human being. But I don't know about that with personality disorders. Most people just stay in them and they just keep moving it along. They don't ever know. It's in part, I believe it is the society in which we live in, which tells you constantly that you need self-esteem and to respect yourself and to love yourself and all this stuff. So what it's telling you is the society is saying, no, it's everybody else. It's not you. And that's not a good place to start. Sometimes it is everybody else, but that's a rare factor. That's a rare time. You could just be surrounded by jerks. Yes. There are toxic people you can be around for sure. I know. I was, I wanted to be make movies and stuff. I be a film director and writer when I was young. I got in the theater to kind of get foot into that. I acted, but I did all kinds of stuff. But with theater, there's a lot involved. There's tech stuff. There's set designs. Like I said, I've done a lot of other stuff production wise. But the people that I was around and the friends that I had then, a lot of them were absolutely toxic, and I had to leave that when I was pretty young. You have to understand when you're in a situation. Now, if you're in that situation and you maintain that situation, then whose fault is that? Maybe you don't know, but man, I don't know about you. I don't want to call people my friends who are basically horrible, cruel people all the time, or who aren't developing, man. I mean, if you're not growing, there's something wrong with you. Like, you should be growing in some manner or another. If it's not intellectually, perhaps spiritually, right? Maybe at least you're getting gains in the gym or something, but grow. Don't stay a stagnant person.
They are disorders of personality or character, if you will. They're ingrained, long-term dysfunctional ways of thinking about yourself and thinking about and relating to other people. They don't go away. They're consistent across various parts of your life. They may not be exactly the same in each situation, but we're talking about fundamental character issues that affect how a person relates to other people. And they're unfortunately really resistant to treatment. So what are the cluster Bs? They are borderline personality disorder, narcissistic personality disorder, histrionic personality disorder, and antisocial personality disorder, which is a synonym for sociopathy or psychopathy. These are called the dramatic and erratic personality disorders.
So to break that down really quickly, antisocial is typically male driven. Borderline is typically female driven. Histrionics depends. It can split between both. Most people have, if they have one, they have some or a lot of another. Borderline and histrionics tend to come together a lot. So does narcissism with histrionics. And did he mention narcissism? I don't, whatever. But antisocial isn't the same thing as narcissism either. But antisocial people tend to be narcissistic because they tend to not care about anyone else, right? So just understand that when we talk about these, there's generally at least two of them going on at once in some factor or another. And Josh will talk about these things and note that we all have characteristics of this. We all have some sort of narcissism. We all get a little hysterical every now and again, right? Histrionic is basically a issue of emotional regulation, right? And the borderlines are very black and white thinking, and these we can all have these at times, but it is the fundamental nature of these people once again.
So the example that I would give, people want to understand how I conceive of this and where I came from. I am estranged from my mother. My best guess for my mother is that she has borderline and narcissistic personality disorders. And the quick way that I give people an insight into this, although I'm in an age now where I'm in middle age, and I know a lot of people aren't going to get my references. So if you don't get these movies, I'll have to find.
We'll be fine. We're middle-aged as well, and our audience is even older. Don't worry about that.
Okay.
I'm young. I'm still young. Fuck both of you.
Yeah, me too. So I'm not going to be able to help you Zoomers figure all this out.
I know. I'm 75 years young. If you want to know what kind of childhood I had, if you want to know what kind of person my mother was, this sounds a little flip and it is a little funny and it's okay to laugh at it, but I mean it actually literally. My mother was a cross between a trailer park version of Joan Crawford in Mommy Dearest and the mother in the horror movie Carrie. That is the kind of personality style that my mother has. That was what our childhood was like growing up. Absolute emotional instability. A parent who turned her children into her caregivers, doing work around the house, being an emotional confidant for her children, telling them secrets, romantic.
And I want to make another note here, and I don't know all the literature behind this, but I know there is some. But Josh is a gay man, and there is evidence that these type of people and these early relationships, of course, wreck your romantic relationships later in life. And so, the formational years, the foundational years, is where you getting a bond with your children. And I do believe that has influence, and I've seen it. I've seen it in numerous occasions. You can often tell. Well, I'll give you an example of a tyrannical mother I probably mentioned before. And so there's this girl I know, and I don't know her that well, but I know her from the local bar that I go to on occasion. And of course, that bar is like a place a guy I went to high school with owns, and there's a bunch of people I've known for a long time. So it's kind of like a Cheers type situation, right? And this girl's like in in these circles, and she's kind of strange. She's she's actually a sweetheart. She's really nice, but she's just overweight. She's kind of mousy and weird, and she's into all the communist sloganeering and whatever else. Well, I met her mom one night, and it immediately reminded me of my ex-wife. When I run into these people, that's the first thing I think. I'm like, oh, okay. It's just so glaring when I meet someone like this. And I guess her mom thought I was cute or something. I had a big old beard then, but she was telling me I look like Cat Stevens or something. I don't know. But I didn't want any parts of it, but I saw the stuff that she did to her daughter right there, how she infantilized her, how she treated her, how she basically, had hindered this girl and in any sort of her development. And it's sad. It's sad. So, I say it often, but I'm going to say it again. You are your brother's keeper. the sins that you do to other people that then harm them, you will be held accounted for. I mean, it's pretty simple. We are individuals with individual responsibility, and we are also a collective with collective responsibility. Now, I don't need to go be my brother's keeper to the guy, 2, 3 houses over or something, because I don't know him. I don't need to interject myself into his life. But if he was in trouble, something was going on, and I noticed it and I could stop it, I'm not going to turn a blind eye. I'm going to help him, right? It's kind of like the story of the Good Samaritan. And the funny thing about that is the Jews hated the Samaritans. That was the real purpose and point of that story. The Samaritans were not welcome so much in Judea. They were seen as a lowest form of life because they split from their religious roots sometime before. And so the holy men, the great men in that story, walked by a guy that was robbed and beaten. And they were just like, whatever. But the Samaritan helped the man and came back and checked on him once he put him up in an inn. And the point of that is, again, that you are your brother's keeper. The point of that is, do not be high-minded just because you think you're with the right group or the in group. So, all the based monarchist, Orthodox Justinians, and I'm not against people in the Orthodox Church. I think the Orthodox Church, for the most part, teaches what is correct. Or the Calvinists, for instance, who would call me an Armenian because I believe that you actually have to live as Christ as much as possible in your life, because that's what the Bible says, and that's what everyone taught for 300 some odd years. But I'm Arminius, who lived 1600s during Calvin's time, whenever that was, 1400s. I don't recall off the top of my head, but this is ridiculous. But this is how people think of things. Anyways, let's get back to the video here.
Secrets even that they never should have learned. A series of relationships with men who were physically violent and abusive to her children. These are, my story is not unique. There are a lot of people, sadly, who come from backgrounds like this, but there is a commonality. This isn't just, well, some people fall into these terrible situations. What's going on here is serious and severe personality disorders, emotional dysregulation, exploitative behavior, even towards your own children. This kind of stuff, well, the way I say it is, domestic abuse has gone public. It's gone feral. The sorts of things that I saw in my home growing up that I did not understand are now happening in the wider world, and I see them excessively on what I have been calling the woke left, but unfortunately, it has infected, at least in the United States, the mainstream left.
Okay, Josh, hold on a second there. I'm loving what you're saying. I'm completely on board. Can you give me some concrete examples of that, please?
Yes. So, virtue signaling, we hear that term a lot. Everybody today is a victim. If you want to get attention, if you want to get...
Covert narcissism. That's what this is. I didn't even know about this myself, again, until a few years ago when I wasn't in a relationship with, but I had a roommate who was a covert narcissist. And for me, personally, I think that God puts these things in my life. I tend to connect a lot of dots and a lot of things all the time because of my journey through life and my understanding of things and where God is directing me and needs me to go. So again, when you have a certain thing reoccurring in your life, you always have to ask, well, what's going on with me as well, right? And I think I figured that out pretty well. But yeah, Yeah, covert narcissism. It's probably the most prevalent form of narcissism out there, and it is in the form of woe is me, I'm the victim. You should go check out Aiden Paladin's Dark Triad video. She talks about this. I, maybe it's not the Dark Triad itself. It's probably about it's about virtue signaling. I covered it with before I became friends with Aiden. Covered it some time ago using portions of her videos. It's one of the earlier videos that I've done. This is very, very prevalent in our society. And again, if you start reading into the Dark Triad, what is it? Machiavellianism, narcissism, and psychopathy, I think. I always forget. I'm not the best when listing those kind of things off. Acronyms are another one that really get me. But anyways, if you look into it and you start laying that edifice onto our society and saying, what's going on here? It explains a lot. It explains a lot. And I think one of the reasons why I really have always been into psychology and these kind of things, as well as philosophy, right, is because that these are telling us about our spiritual nature as well, about our the spirit of our nation, which is absolutely and utterly demoralized. So I for me, if we can all say, well, something's wrong, right? But for me, I have to articulate this. I have to figure it out. I have to put the puzzle pieces together in order to fix it. Because if we don't reverse engineer it, we're going to point to 1,001 things that are not the actual problem. And we need to understand and be able to communicate to other people what the actual problem is. And as I have repeatedly said over the course of several weeks now, we are a society that is psychopathologizing our citizens on purpose.
A story written about you, if you want your tweet to go viral, you have to claim victimhood. Somebody said something to you that was racist. Somebody said something that was transphobic. Somebody did not respect your pronouns. The level of offense that is given to these things is so excessive. And it seems like culturally, we've been trained to just respond to that. Oh, that's very, very sad. But what do we see? Perfect example from U.S. media this week. New York Times reporter Taylor Lorenz, who is somebody who's written a lot of work for the New York Times, that people, I think rightly, have said, you're trying to get people canceled. You're trying to ruin their reputations. They're not living up to woke standards. And yet a journalist like this will be interviewed by MSNBC and say that the criticism that she got for this gave her post-traumatic stress disorder. So it's a reversals of victim and offender. And we see this a lot. I think you guys see that a lot. You've had guests on your show who've talked about that dynamic.
No, yes, we have indeed. The thing that worries me, Josh, is the fact that people can monetize this behavior. And once you can monetize it, it's the ultimate incentive. Yeah.
Well, you can monetize it, right? You can build a personal brand out of being a victim, and lots of people have done it. I mean, I think there was an abortive attempt with the Oscars. Jada Pinkett Smith, I think, wanted to be the world's biggest victim for having a disability called alopecia. So
be careful now. I'm losing my hair as well, Josh. I'm going to have to fly over there and slap you.
Isn't that just how it is, though? Men just lose their hair and go bald. But when famous women lose their hair and go bald, they don't just go bald. They have a disability called alopecia. It's an illness. That's part of it. I think we see these double standards here, too. Yes, Francis, you can monetize it. But I think being a victim pays in currency other than cash, too. I think it pays in what you can call narcissistic supply. And that's the term that people use, adapted from talk about drug culture, right? You're getting that feeling of praise. You're getting that high from the attention. and it gives you status. It gives you social status, particularly on the left. The more of a victim you are, the higher you are in sort of the symbolic hierarchy. So I think it's monetizable, but I think it's also monetizable, if you will, in a social way. And honestly, I think for a lot of people, that social attention may be even more attractive than the money.
Yes, it is. This is why we have Amber Heard out there right now, continually trying to slander and defame Johnny Depp after the court trial was over, and everyone could tell that she was lying, except for the corporate press. Why would you even give her an interview in the first place? It's ridiculous. But yeah, you get these points, and she knows that there's some amount of crazy people out there who will support her. And so some support is better than none, I guess, when you are an emotional vampire. And that's what they are. And Slocum talks about this too. He talks about how the ancients of the past have stories like vampires and stuff like that, or the succubus. And he thinks that those are metaphors, right? Allegories of what these personality disorders are. Now, perhaps I think that there is a tying in of that with other things, ancient, ancient spiritual beings and things that people have spoke about and talked about over the course of centuries. But again, as I spoke of earlier, that is where these things kind of intersect at. You can believe that there are interdimensional beings out there who influence things in the world, or you don't have to. But either way, when we talk about spiritual things, we're talking about attitudes and influences. We still use the language today. We still say, that's the spirit, partner. Are you in good spirits today? We understand what the word means, but we seem to make it so abstract because we have to be these haughty people who are, we're beyond believing in God. We're beyond believing in these spiritual things and these, it's beneath us. We are men of ration now. And then, then you hear nothing but scientism. I believe in the multi-dimensional beings that we can't see, flat out. I absolutely believe that because of things in my life that indicate that very strongly. But again, does that truly really matter? We know that these things exist. They've always existed. But what we're seeing is an explosion of it, a mainstreaming of it. And we're seeing not just the mainstreaming of it, but the encouragement of it. And I'm going to show you some stuff on that as well.
And it's particularly when you think about narcissism. Now we're stand-up comedians, and we were involved in an industry stuffed to the brim with narcissists. And what was really fascinating, Josh, is the moment this culture, this way of thinking.
Yeah, violence. I saw that. I actually behavioral arts is streaming like right now or earlier. I saw that before I got the show together.
This ideology seeped in. You started to see more and more people describe themselves as gender non-binary, pronouns in bio, all of these different things. Fat activists. Now, when I grew up, there was no such thing, but people were legitimately calling themselves fat activists, anti-racist.
And again, it's driven by narcissism. It's driven by a need to feel special, and it's driven by power. We've talked about this before. I used the James Lindsay video some weeks back, talking about this specifically. What is Marxism? Well, it's pretty simple. No matter what iteration of it, it is as simple as this. You are privileged because you have special property, whether that is being straight, white, gay, whatever that is, right? And therefore, because you have special property and special privilege, then you are an oppressor, whether you believe it or not. And everyone else who is not, let's say, who is not a heterosexual, who is not white or European, who is not fit, who is overweight, well, they're being oppressed by you. And so you must be educated. And we're going to talk about, I think by the end of the show today, what education actually means and what it is. And you have to be educated into the new belief system that replaces that. And you have to not repent. I mean, it's sort of a repentance, but you must then flog yourself for all of the rest of history in order to make amends for things that people did that you never even met. Yeah, that's pretty much Marxism in a nutshell. And again, it's just about power. Marx himself was an awful, horrible person. And I would suggest that he himself probably was a narcissist and had antisocial personality disorder.
Just seems as like this kind of toxic relationship between the ideology and the narcissism. And let's be fair, we've all got narcissism latent within us. So it's also kind of, it's corrosive as well, because it's encouraging us to behave this way.
Absolutely. Narcissism is socially rewarded now. It's always been the case. Take an industry like Hollywood. Hollywood is full of broken people. This is where children from broken homes, traumatizing homes, inadequate, neglectful backgrounds, this is where they go. I'm not saying they do it consciously, but this happens to a lot of creative people. You know, they're trying to find a way through art, through self-expression, maybe to make themselves whole again, or to get some satisfaction out of that work that feels more meaningful. But unfortunately, when you're in a place like Hollywood, the more outrageously you behave, the more diva-like you behave, the more attention you get. And I don't think Hollywood is a place that you go to in order to get mentally better. You know, there was a really great series on FX a few years ago that looked at the last years of the famous actresses Joan Crawford and Bette Davis's life. And there was a scene in there where Joan Crawford was in the hospital, you know, huge narcissist. And the publicist says to her, you know the thing about Hollywood? I don't know if it creates narcissists or attracts people like you. And that's the question. I think it's both. But it's definitely incentivized.
All right, guys. Well, that was that. I highly encourage you to go check out that entire stream. It's an hour long, and go check out Disaffected. Josh has a really good show. I've been listening to it a lot lately. I'm vibing on it because he's coming from a similar place that I am. But yeah, with all that, we know that we are being lied to constantly. And case in point here, we have from the United States Department of Justice. Let's see if I can bigly this a little bit. United States Attorney's Office of Eastern District of Pennsylvania. Former U.S. Congressman and Philadelphia political operative pleads guilty to election fraud charges. The United States Attorney Jennifer Arbiter Williams announced today that the former U.S. Congressman Michael Ozzie Myers, 79, of Philadelphia, PA, pled guilty today of conspiracy to deprive voters of civil rights, bribery, obstruction of justice, falsification of voting records, and conspiracy to illegally vote in a federal election for orchestrating schemes to fraudulently stuff the ballot boxes for specific Democrat candidates in the 2014, 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018 Pennsylvania elections. Yes. And this guy was a Republican, folks. A Republican. But, you know, the media never lies. They never lie about anything. I find it very funny and interesting that Philadelphia, of all places, one of the places that was questioned in the 2020 election, is has that going on. A city that's remained a Democrat stronghold for, I don't know, decades. and is absolutely trash. Like no one, there's a small part of Philly that's nice, a very small part, and the rest of it's pretty dilapidated and pretty dangerous. It's almost like it's a typical Democrat-run city. Interesting. In other news, let me get this switched up here. We have the story of oh, sorry guys, like I'm still not over. I'm still upset that StreamYard's changed the way I get to share things. US Today removes 23 articles after wrong thing. After reporter fabricated sources. The journalist was identified as Gabriella Miranda, a breaking news reporter who resigned from Virginia-based newspaper weeks ago. This does not surprise me at all. Does this surprise anybody? Does this surprise anybody at all that you know, this lady was let go? And I'm not exactly sure the circumstances of how she got caught, but it would make sense to me that she got caught. Let's read the story a little bit. I know I've heard about some of this, but it would make sense to me that she got caught by somebody who actually cares, probably somebody more conservative, instead of worried about the narratives. USA Today said it has deleted 23 articles from its website after investigation found that the reporter who wrote them used fabricated sources. The journalist who said to have used the fabricated sources was identified as Gabriella Miranda, a breaking news reporter who resigned from the Virginia-based newspaper weeks ago. The paper confirmed Thursday. Miranda's most recent news story from USA Today is dated April 17th. According to the bio on her website, she was assigned to cover trending news nationwide while at USA Today. Same people who are fact-checking, by the way. Before being hired by USA Today, she covered education and Hispanic community with the Gainesville Times in Georgia. So she's a leftist. I promise you. The Post has reached out to USA Today, parent company Gannett, as well as Miranda, seeking comment. Miranda has deleted her LinkedIn account. The Times obtained a draft note that read, after receiving external correction requests, USA Today audited the reporting work of Gabriella. Well, yeah, it was external. The audit revealed that some individuals quoted were not affiliated with organizations claimed and appeared to be fabricated. What happens all the time. This is why I follow and have been for a long time Tim Pool, because this is what Tim talks about. He tells you how all this stuff works. He worked it, and people don't necessarily like him or whatever for whatever reasons. I don't know. I think Tim's just trying to do what he thinks is right and try to tell the truth. And he's a young guy still. I mean, well, I guess he's like 36, so he's kind of getting up there, but he's still a pretty young guy. You know, he's figuring things out. But what he knows for sure is that the news is fake. It is synthetic. Right? How about this? This came out just the other week.
At the end of the day, money over morals kind of is how it is. And one of the reasons why I want to leave news is because it's not really as impartial as it had been.
As what?
Impartial.
What do you mean?
Picking a side or like leaning one way.
Hey, Mike Milford. Yes. You're with CBS News. This is James O'Keefe with Project Veritas. This seat taken? The discipline of verification is what separates journalism from all other forms of communication, such as propaganda, advertising, fiction, or entertainment. Society professional journalists say you need multiple sources for verification. But you're on tape saying you use your own company, CBS News, to fact check.
But you can cite your own company for a fact check.
Yeah. That's pretty cool. I mean, it's like a cheap way of doing it. Like it goes by quicker. So I'll just Google like whatever and then like CBS on the end. And if there's a CBS article about it.
This is telephone, my friends. I don't need to play this whole video. This is just reporters, journalists, supposed reporters and journalists doing telephone. It's like Twitter. Someone said something on Twitter. They were a journalist. Therefore, it is truth, and we are going to repeat it. And I found this interesting. This is an older article, as you can see. It's from 2017. But as we talk about these psychopaths and how they're psychopathologizing you and all that, I want to remind you of the whole thing about the fake news, right? How fake news became meaningless. This is from Deadspin. Let's talk about fake news. Are you excited? I am. Actually, I'm not. That claim was fake news. Haha. Long ago, in the days of yore, in 2016, America came gradually to mainstream awareness that a shadowy sector of hudsuckers and fraudsters, possibly according to some reports, including or in the employment of elements of the Russian government. Let's write some fake news about a fake news, right? Of course, in hindsight, we know that that's fake news, but we knew that then too, right? But this is what gaslighters do. This is what they do, folks. Including or in the employment of elements of the Russian government, had built an industry out of creating flamboyant, inflammatory falsehoods packaged to seem like credible news stories and pumping these into Facebook. Like Hunter Biden's laptop, right? There they had a troubling tendency to circulate like wildfire among people. Either A, not up to the task of judging the factual accuracy of what was presented and its packaging to look like credible reported news. That's everyone who watches legacy media. Everybody. That's exactly who they are. They don't want to look into it. Conditioned by an exegesis of media, political, and in public education to find it plausible that the ideological sympathetic outlet they'd never previously heard of could be reporting incredibly scandalous news. Like, for example, that high-ranking members of a major political campaign could be running a child sex ring out of a pizza parlor. Well, Pizzagate was strange. And what do you mean? What do you mean? Because, see, here's the thing. I have receipts, bud. I got receipts for everything. Have you heard of the founders? I mentioned them the other week. I'm pretty sure that they were a part of the CIA. Have you heard of Boys Town? Pretty sure the Secret Service was running that. Pretty sure. And we're going to talk about old Ashley Biden's journal here in a moment. But yeah, let's watch this real quick.
Back to the Truth Factory. The recent media exposure of the NXIVM cult and Jeffrey Epstein's crimes have begun to shed light in the mainstream on the clandestine organizations operating within our society that prey upon minors. But decades before these stories broke headlines, there was another similarly devious and mysterious group in the 1980s known as the Finders Cult. It's been suggested that this was a satanic child trafficking network, possibly tied to and protected by the CIA, and to this day there are still far more questions than answers about the Finders. The information that I'm about to share with you in this video is not a wacky conspiracy theory. All of this comes directly from the pages of police reports, newly released FBI files, and accounts taken from witnesses, investigators, and members of the cult themselves. But as a warning, this story is very disturbing. Let's begin. In the afternoon of February 4th, 1987, the Tallahassee Police Department responded to an anonymous tip that two well-dressed men driving a blue van were spotted at a local park escorting 6 disheveled-looking children. According to a witness, the men, who were potentially high on drugs, were looking for a park with a swimming pond to bathe the visibly filthy children. The children, 2 girls and 4 boys ranging in ages from 2 to 6 years old, were very dirty and unkept with bug bites on their entire body and scratches on their legs. When police arrived, the men Michael Hallwell and Douglas Ammerman claimed to be teachers traveling to Mexico to start a school for brilliant children. When they were asked about the parents of the children, Ammerman became very evasive and stated that the children's parents were in D.C. Hallwell refused to give any information and then pretended to faint when he was told that he was under arrest for child abuse due to neglect. He also later laid down in his holding cell, just jerking his body and refusing to open his eyes. Hallwell also had with him 2 copies of Miranda rights forms, one of which stated, "I have nothing to hide," and the other with, "I have something to hide." According to the New York Times, witnesses told investigators that they had seen 2 other men and children in a second van make contact with the first group in the park, but that they had driven away before the police arrived.
It was just 2 of you?
No, there were actually the 2 of us who were arrested, plus a second van with 3 or 4 other men from the finders. So there were actually 2 vans traveling together. The other 3 or 4 men were in Tallahassee looking for work, while Danny and I were on a camping trip with the kids, because the idea was to have the kids be in nature. So we were in some kind of a state park outside of Tallahassee, and living kind of this kind of babysitting. Babysitting I believe there
6 kids you had, is what they said.
Yeah, there was Mary and Max and Ben and BB and Honeybee and John Paul. My son was the youngest.
By the next morning, the Tallahassee police confirmed that the men were a part of a group called the Finders. U.S. District Court records described them as a Washington-based cult that conducted brainwashing techniques at a warehouse in D.C.
All true. And there's more to this, but for the sake of time, I'm not going to play this whole video. I just wanted to bring up some things, right? I just wanted to talk about this fake news stuff, right? And the scandalous nature of the things that these people do, and then tell you we don't do that. Repeatedly, I should say, over and over again, we find reports of these people who are pushing for drag time story hour or drag queen story hour, right? And those kind of things. And then all of a sudden, guess what happens? Oh, they're arrested on child porn. There was a case when was it? On the Disaffected podcast, Josh Slocum talked about it, where there was a gay couple that had adopted children. These were gay men, and it was found that the couple had child porn, and they didn't do anything. Basically, they let him go, continue to be around his adopted kids. This is a travesty. This is why we have so many broken people. I don't want the government with the force of its guns to come in and take children away from the families either. But my mother was in and out of foster care growing up. I've known plenty of people who have been. It's not the best. You're lucky if you get someone who's good. And so there is a hard factor. There's a hard thing we have to figure out here, but we can't encourage a society that basically just completely shatters the psychology of every human being, every child that comes through it. It's not going to be good for our future. Things will fall apart. Look at Gen Z right now and their inability to cope with anything because of their increased level of narcissistic perception and their histrionic outburst of being offended as any little given thing might offend them, or anything that's not in the woke mindset. So let's get back to this article. I'm going to show you that. I'm going to show you some of that here in a minute too. And these are supposed adults. In substance, these aren't so different from the ludicrous conspiriona chain emails. I guess that's supposed to be paranoia and conspiracy together. Emails your survivalist uncle used to forward to everyone in the family. The problem is that thanks to traits of Facebook, most particularly its toxic algorithmic antagonism or agnosticism about the substance and credibility of the news or newses stories it promotes, these spread a lot more quickly and are granted an extra veneer of believability by their appearing right alongside actual news reported in people's newsfeed. No, they don't, unless you're dumb and you don't take the time to understand what is true and what's not true. And don't get me wrong, I've probably spread fake news at one point or another, or thought something was real based on some report, but I try not to do that. And we have people in the mainstream media doing it every day on purpose. 100% on purpose. I mean, I'm sure you guys remember the Sinclair video way back in the day? Fake news. Let me show that to you.
Fox San Antonio's Jessica Headley.
And I'm Ryan Wolf.
Our greatest responsibility is to serve our Treasure Valley communities,
the El Paso, Las Cruces communities,
Eastern Iowa communities,
Mid-Michigan communities.
We are extremely proud of the quality, balanced journalism that CBS 4 News produces.
But
we are concerned about troubling trend of irresponsible, one-sided news stories plaguing our country.
The sharing of biased and false news has become all too common on social media. More alarming, some media outlets publish these same fake stories without checking facts first.
The sharing of biased and
false news has become all too common on social media.
More alarming, some media outlets publish these stories simply aren't true without checking facts first.
Unfortunately, some members of the media use their platforms to push their own personal bias and agenda to control exactly what people think. And this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
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 Synthetic society, folks. That is the synthetic society right there. This is extremely dangerous to our oligarchy. Yeah. And I can't recall the lady's name off the top of my head, but she did a TED talk on this. There was a great video the other year. It was a compilation, and I thought I had it, and I can't find it anywhere. But I can't think of her name. She's a reporter. But she delved into the whole fake news thing as it came out. And guess who started the whole fake news thing? Hillary Clinton and the Clinton campaign. Imagine that. Imagine that. But hey, now that might be fake news too. No, it's not. It's not. And it's hard to find news articles on that. I'll show you finding news articles here in a bit. We got we'll show you the difference between Google and DuckDuckGo. Not that DuckDuckGo's great either anymore since they decided to cuck on Ukraine, but whatever. Let's see here. It says you can imagine why this is very bad if you generally agree with the preposition that one of the very basic things a society needs in order to function and or qualify as a society is a broadly agreed upon set of facts about what's going on in the world, even if it may host a wide variety of ideas about what those facts mean or what they should be done about them. So this right, is saying exactly what that video is showing. Everyone agreeing upon these facts, except for it's not everyone agreeing upon these facts. It's a bunch of people who are actors who read news, because that's what they are, that are overpaid to say a line to convince you, once it's repeated over and over again, that, yeah, this is what's going on. And it's not working so well these days. It still works, but not as well as it used to. And maybe there is some light at the end of the tunnel here, in that if enough boomers eventually, pass on, that we might have a more active and educated populace. But I'm not that convinced that that's going to be the case, because again, we are purposely psychopathologizing our entire society. I think the basic set of rules is important. The basic set of facts. You guys can't even tell me what a woman is, right? So let's get to the next part. The next part concerns the term fake news. This is different. This is a different issue from the above. Even though the term fake news was invented and to describe that above issue, it's a different issue because, in a nutshell, liberals are stupid. Well, I won't necessarily disagree with you on that, unless you mean actual liberals like myself, a classical liberal. But sure. Here's what I mean. You could call these viral Facebook falsehood hoaxes, and probably should, because that's what they are. They share their lineage with Cardiff Giant and Alien Autopsy and Hack Heaven and the moon landing. Just kidding. Unfortunately, in the rush to create a name for a trend, both the mainstream media and liberals do your qualming about that use of the word. And down below in the comments, okay, whatever happened to parentheses, right? Like, you don't need to read what's in the parentheses. I don't understand what that dashing is for. Anyways, horrified by the role these monstrosities played in the rise of Donald Trump, lit upon the term fake news to describe them, and thereby played themselves. The problem here is that the cynical conservative playbook for the past 35 years or more has been to label the media broadly as a biased institution that knowingly prints slanted news and purposely proposes, for the purpose of advancing a left-wing media agenda for the United States, or left-wing agenda for the United States. Yeah, we know that. We've done, the studies are out there. This isn't some labeling from conservatives. It's the truth. But see, this is how they are framing it, right? Oh, the conservatives labeled unfairly and unjustly. It's not like, 85 to 95% of every newsroom is run by Democrats. No, it is. It actually is. And you have to, at least as far as editorial choices and whatever else. You can even look at Fox. And I saw a clip the other day. I don't know, it might have been Salty pulled it up or something. I don't remember. But it was Newt Gingrich talking to Samantha Harris on Fox, and he brings up Soros. And the minute he talks about Soros, guess what? She clams up and shuts down. You know why? Because Soros funds Fox News as well. But what did he say? He said, well, if the Soros DAs weren't hired, that's all he said. And everyone said, no, it's fake news. No, it's not. The Open Society is real. They talk about it. You can follow the money. I'm not saying George Soros controls the world, but he's got a lot of money. And him and his buddies are planning for a one world government where you are a debt slave. You already are a debt slave. You already live in the one world government. You just don't understand that you are. You don't understand that they have this global power, that they're about to shift our monetary system. They're about to make China the strongest nation in the world, while America gets brought down low, very, very low. And that's not just America. Of course, I live in the U.S. I'm going to talk about the U.S., but that's that's Canada, that's England, that's Western Europe, and that is Australia and New Zealand. And if Americans, you want to know your future, look at the UK, look at Canada, look at Australia, and look at New Zealand. That's your future. Check the other streams here real quick, guys. All right. Let's see. In effect, the right-winger has been calling virtually every published news story whose revelation it found inconvenient fake news for a whole actual decades. No, they haven't. But you all say that from any outlet that skews right. This is the projection. This is the projection of the cluster B personality disorder, right? This is no small part of the reason why these viral Facebook hoaxes propagate so smoothly along right-wingers in the first place. No, the people on the right are actually curious for information. The people on the left are NPCs who live in the synthetic society. They have been synthesized. In any case, this goes on. I'm not going to go through all this. I just thought I would bring it up. It was interesting. But for the sake of time, because I have other things to get to, we're going to keep moving. So let me find what my my next thing will be. So yeah. I think we're going to talk about this Great Reset thing. I think that's what we need to talk about. So there's a few things here, and I'm going to play a couple videos, just the beginning of mostly. Actually, you know what? Before I get into that, sorry guys, I had the show ready last week and I didn't end up streaming, and then I ended up adding to it. And so it was going to be a little bit of a slicker show. Let's talk about some of this fake news stuff real quick. Here's a perfect example, since I mentioned Ukraine a minute ago. Now, I have told you before about Azov and the Nazi presence in Ukraine. I told you several weeks ago, I believe it was 2 weeks ago when I streamed last, that the CIA set up the Nazi presence in Ukraine. And the media has been telling you that there is no Nazi presence in Ukraine, or they're good Nazis somehow.
Can you blow that up a little? Enhance. 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 Stop. That's it.
Yeah.
You didn't see anything.
Didn't see
right?
anything. Didn't see anything. Nothing to see there, folks. Nothing to see. And yeah, it's ridiculous, the lies that they tell. It is insane. And so we all remember, of course, the numbers from the coronavirus. I've talked about it numerous times. Talked about how they are manipulated, how the data is actually presented, official data, CDC data, is presented in a very dubious way. It is not organized well, and it has weird columns. Like it'll say has coronavirus but doesn't have the flu, has coronavirus with the flu but doesn't have XYZ, and then a bunch of different columns. I don't know. I haven't looked at the data in forever, but it is quite confusing, is not straightforward, and that's why I end up not using the CDC data most of the time when I would stream. But here we have the curious case of excess deaths that we still haven't quite sorted out. And so I thought Matt Christensen did a really great video the other day on this, and I'm not going to try and play his entire video on here, but it's worth a listening. So I want to pull it up.
Effectively all of the economic catastrophe that we're currently facing originates with buying into the fraudulent bargain of lockdowns. The idea that government could and should shut down our production and somehow cover for that damage with checks based on nothing but the wave of their magic wand. Even if it seemed like a plausible or appropriately cautious approach at the time, the logic of its consequences was always clear. If you produce less stuff and you inject more money, that means more money is chasing less stuff, which means that stuff will cost more money. There is no government check or government sweet talk that can change that calculation. And the justification for that strategy, both speculatively 2 years ago and now 2 years later in retrospect, is that it saved lives. Well, what are you saying? That you think the economy is more important than lives? Exactly how many lives is a good economy worth to you? Don't you think that lives are more important than the dollar? Well, number one, the economy is lives. The economy is simply the production and consumption of goods and services.
Or as Ludwig von Mises said, it is human action. That is the treatise he wrote on the economy. I think I have a copy back here somewhere, but I have to pull it out. So, but it is simple as that. When we talk about economics, we're talking about the daily behaviors of human beings interacting with each other. That produces things, right? It can produce poor outcomes and it can produce good outcomes. We know how to produce good outcomes, yet we do the things that produce poor outcomes. Why? Well, because we do these things on purpose. And then they gaslight you to say, oh, no, you're the crazy one. You need to listen to the experts. They're so smart, the experts. And if you don't listen to us, you're a white supreme pizza. Like, seriously. Because you are. You are, according to the left. If you believe in Christianity, you're a white supremacist because Christianity expanded across the world. It made things better. And to say that we became, it took a long time, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of evil in the past, but we became a more peaceful people because of the ideas of Christianity over time. We became a more productive people, a more philosophical people. But you can't say that's racist. It's racist. And then you can go on to other things like, Europe had a great geography for development of nations and all this other stuff versus, let's say, Africa, right? I mean, you still have that problem in South America because of large swaths of jungle and stuff. Not all of it is developed. The U.S. has terrain very much like Europe. And so it was easy to develop there. Same with certain parts of China. Geography had a lot to do with how these civilizations came up. But just as much as that, so was the base operating system. And for the Europeans, it was Christianity. Mind you, it was skewed quite often. It was corrupted, and twisted, and all kinds of horrible things have happened because of that. But if you believe that at all, that Christianity and the European ethic was, superior, and that's why it expanded across the world, and that's why it's copied today by nations that don't have any direct ties to us, not until the modern period. If you say that, you are a white supremacist. That's what the left is calling a white supremacist. Not the same thing as, Izov, though. Not the same thing. They're the good kind of Nazis. It's just utterly, utterly insane, all of it. And it's no wonder why people I mean, the society is just absolutely schizophrenic, and it's no wonder why people are going around and going off the rockers and shooting people and everything else. Anyways, let's keep on with the video.
That's how we all live. That's how we all make a living. And with that life comes a series of rights inherent to it, among them to property and the free exchange and pursuit of it. Do I really value and respect your life if I diminish or deny those rights?
Well, that's not a possibility, Spook, but nice try.
Do I really value and respect your life if I put you in a prison for your own good? And number two, what exactly is the evidence that the fraudulent bargain of lockdowns saved any lives? We just accept that premise is true with little or no demonstration of it, perhaps because we need that premise to rationalize why we so heavily damaged ourselves otherwise. The massive costs we've assumed have to be justified by some sort of massive reward, whether that reward is actually real or not. But what if the evidence is actually to the contrary? What if we actually just cost more lives needlessly? What if the fraudulent bargain of lockdowns was actually fraudulent on both ends of the deal? As in, not only did we ruin our economy, but we actually caused more death in the process too. Now, to be clear, I am not alleging that is definitively the case, but there is evidence to show that the math is a lot murkier than it was supposed to be, as demonstrated by a new study from the National Bureau of Economic Research by Casey Mulligan, a University of Chicago economics professor, and Robert Arnott, a private financial researcher, titled Non-COVID Excess Deaths 2020 to 2021, Collateral Damage of Policy Choices. In more plain language, to what extent did our political reaction to COVID correlate with increases in death completely unrelated to the virus itself? We know that 2020 and 2021 saw more Americans dying than in years prior. Those deaths above what we would expect in a normal year we call excess deaths. And we also know that some of those deaths were caused by or closely related to the virus, and some were not. Some were completely unrelated. So what are the quantities and the characteristics of the excess deaths that have nothing to do with the virus?
Let's remember some facts. What is it, 94%, 96%, something like that, of all people who passed of the coof, something like that, had 2.3 or 2.5 comorbidities, something like that. Whatever it is, I don't even remember. I haven't looked at this stuff in forever. The point is that we know that these people were sick and dying. This was released. I talked about it over and over and over again from the BBC very early on. They said they would have to adjust their excess death rate because these people who were sick and dying that would have died within the year anyways will not be counted as COVID deaths. All that changed because that was a doctor being honest at the very beginning of the pandemic. All that changed, right? We even have our CDC director now stating very specifically that, yeah, only about 10% of the deaths that we had were directly from COVID. Directly killing people. Right? So everything else is an artificial inflated number. It's synthetic.
To address that question, the researchers used CDC death data to evaluate primarily three factors: the number of deaths, the primary cause of each death, and the age bracket of each death to calculate how many deaths are expected and how many are excess or above what we'd expect. Researchers looked at the trends of deaths by cause and age dating back to 1999. And there are some important limitations to consider here. The CDC's most recent death numbers are provisional, as in still under review and could change. And
they won't. They might in the future, but they won't because they're still trying to justify this. And the lockdowns, you know, I watched Prager was on Tim Pool the other night. I watched a segment. I didn't watch it or whatever. But the segment I caught, he made a very good point because I haven't watched anything from Prager in a long time. He made a very good point. He said something about, I'm glad you said lockdowns and not COVID, because it wasn't COVID. People naturally, if COVID was that bad, would not have gone to work, would have been actually scared. You would not have had to have the propaganda media out there telling everybody every second about all these people dying, right? You don't need to advertise when a deadly illness is around because people see the effects of it. It's pretty simple. I know exactly 2 people who have passed away. No, three now. One of my friend's grandmother, she was in her 80s. I have a cousin who passed away who was in his mid-50s and was overweight, had some heart issues. And who was the other one? I can't even remember. Maybe it is 2 people. The most deadliest pandemic ever. Or maybe it wasn't that, right? Maybe it wasn't the most deadly ever, but it was supposed to be worrisome. But we had to shut everything down or people will die. Except for in New York, where we just put them all together in the nursing homes and let them die, right?
As a technical matter, this paper is not peer-reviewed. It's a working paper, but as we'll get to, its central findings were replicated by the New York Times last week. But technicals and qualifiers aside, the findings are damning. The researchers find there were 171,000 excess non-COVID deaths from the virus's arrival in April 2020 through the end of 2021, plus 72,000 unmeasured COVID deaths, meaning deaths not yet vetted that could actually be additional excess deaths unrelated to the virus. That's across all age groups, all causes. So over 170,000 more people dead than average for reasons completely unrelated to COVID. And those results are even more ominous when we consider who died and why. On a percent increase basis, as in
who died and why, the people who were the least vulnerable. That 45 to 64, you might have a little bit of vulnerability there. But those people under 45, almost no risk. Almost. It doesn't mean that there isn't some risk. It depends on your own health. It depends on your own immune system, your own body. But this is what happens, right? And again, let's not forget the people who were old and purposefully murdered. They were. They knew that they were doing what they were doing. They did it on purpose to boost the numbers and to get money. And to say F you to Donald Trump because they had a Navy ship that would have taken care of them. But no, they couldn't do that. It's easier to just let the plebs die. These are disgusting overlords, folks. And when you talk with people that praise them, you need to remind them of these behaviors. But maybe the person you're talking to is a psychopath too, right?
How large was the increase in non-COVID deaths over the normal expected number? The worst effects are actually among working age people, ages 18 to 64. And the worst of the worst, by a slight margin, among the youngest adults, aged 18 to 44. Overall, working age people died of non-COVID reasons in numbers roughly 26% higher than they did in decades prior. The researchers find roughly 62,000 of these excess non-COVID deaths per year.
26%. That is an insane number to jump in a single year. And we know that there were children who did this, who committed suicide because of the lockdowns. They weren't doing well. They weren't doing well at all.
Over 2 years of the pandemic, that's an estimate of over 120,000 excess younger people dead for reasons completely unrelated to COVID. And if they weren't dying from COVID, well, then why were they dying?
Well, I'll leave it there. You can go watch the rest of Matt's video. Of course, we know that mostly these were deaths of despair. There were a lot of car accidents, actually. It was higher for some reason, even though there was less traffic. You got to wonder if those people were intoxicated or something. Yeah, they did reject the hospital ship. And people are not talking about all of the missing money they handed out. Yeah. But so that was Matt. I played a little bit of this video on the Ins Justify the Memes the other day, and I'm going to play it again here.
Life insurance companies have reported an overwhelming and unexplainable increase in all-cause deaths among 18 to 49-year-olds. Along with that, there's also been an increase in certain medical diagnoses, such as miscarriages and Bell's palsy.
I believe this is from May. I think that's when it's from, if I remember correctly.
Here to give us her take on the new data and what she believes could be causing the rise in numbers is emergency medicine and disaster specialist, Dr. Kelly Victory. Dr. Victory, good morning. Great to talk to you as always.
Good morning, Jason. Thanks for having me.
Okay, we want to make sure that anytime we talk, we want to make sure the information that we have is accurate. So let's start this interview by telling us, I've seen your correspondence here, what is the source of the information that you're about to present?
Well, this information became available to me or on my radar last week following a hearing with Senator Ron Johnson, who was looking at sort of what he calls a second opinion on the entire response to the COVID pandemic. The medical data was released by 3 career military physicians who got the information from the military database that collects what we call ICD codes, which are the diagnosis codes. And these physicians had a feeling, they believed based on their own observation, that they were seeing a significant uptick in certain conditions. So they actually went back and culled the database from the military on certain conditions over a 5-year period from 2016 through 2020, notably containing 1 year, 2020, of the full-blown pandemic. So they looked at 2016, 17, 18, 19, and 20 at the prevalence of certain conditions, including things like heart attack, blood clots to the lung, miscarriages, those sorts of things. And they compared it to the incidence of those same things in the calendar year 2021 and saw an alarming increase in certain things. For example, they saw a 270% increase in myocardial infarction in 2021, a 300% increase in incidence of Bell's palsy and of certain neurologic complaints, a 470% increase in pulmonary embolisms, blood clots to the lungs, and many, many other huge increases that they found alarming. Now, no one is saying with any certainty, Jason, what is causing this.
No one is saying because they're not allowed. I'm not allowed. You all know. I'm not allowed, at least on YouTube. And in the future, folks, when things get controversial and coming up here during the midterms, there will be a lot of controversy. I promise you, not because I want it, but because the powers that be, the oligarchs want it. The technocrats want it because they want to distract and they want to be able to rig. When that happens, and let's say YouTube starts giving out strikes again, well, I will be doing shows here on YouTube and cutting it off and going exclusively to Rumble and the other platforms. But I'll do that midstream, much like Salty does. If you guys watch Salty Cracker streams, and Salty deletes his YouTube streams. So, unfortunately, I've set it up so that I am streaming versus pre-recording, which I started with. However, I seem to enjoy the stream a little bit better. So, when I started doing that, it's definitely, I like the flow of a stream better. I don't have to worry about being perfect. Everyone knows it's live. I got you all there giving me info. We can talk about stuff. It's a much better interaction. In any case, yeah. So you have been told that no, that certain procedures were perfectly safe and fine. Certain medications they weren't going to hurt you. They were safe and effective. And then we have all these crazy results. And yet the gaslighters in the synthetic society expect you to believe because, well, they have people who will believe. They literally have people that follow every word from their mouth. And my friends, whether you're religious or not, I can tell you what that is. It's idolatry. They make these people their own gods. They think of them as some sort of god. They think that they're special, lovely, perfect people. They have the best interest in mind of everybody, and they have fantasies about them, which is really absurd to me, but they do. I'm not here to pretend like I'm some sort of god or for my own ego. I actually do this because I'm compelled by God. But don't listen to me. I mean, please listen to me, but don't just listen to me at face value. Question, research, go and look this stuff up that I'm telling you. Form your own conclusions. I'm not here to tell you this is how it has to be. I'm here to tell you a perspective that I have based in a area of knowledge that I have and out of my intuition, and because I feel God compels me to do such a thing. And you guys can take it at that and nothing more. But what I do know is that we are in serious economic like crush time. We are about to go through a second Great Depression that's purposefully planned. And I'm going to show you some stuff here. Let's start with this.
A market crash and a recession is around the corner, and I think it's going to be worse than what a lot of people think is going to be. And I don't think 90% of America is ready for it, let alone the world is ready for it. But those who are going to benefit from it the next 2 to 5 years. We'll talk about the top 10 market crashes we've ever had, the duration, how ugly it was, the cause of it. We're going to talk about how to be ready for the difference between a market crash and a recession, what other experts are saying about it, different stocks. And then anyways, based on that, as I make the argument to you, at the end of it, you'll be able to make a decision, what decisions you're going to make with your finances and proper sequencing moving forward. Having said that, at the end of it, the slide is going to be around 80 pages. Some of you guys will have a way to get the 80-page PowerPoint that we'll give to you. So stick around till the very end. The reason why I did this was a private webinar that I hosted just a couple days ago where tens of thousands of people signed on. And the next thing I saw is these things were being uploaded all over YouTube. And I said, I'm going to shoot this again, and I'm going to make this public due to popular demand, and then the audience is going to be able to do whatever they want to do with this information. So having said that, let's get right into it. So first of all, a couple things that we're going to be learning today. The difference between a market crash and a recession, why recessions are important, how to prepare for them, and how to make your millions, whatever the dollar amount is for you, during and after a market crash. So my opinion, I believe a market crash is coming 6 to 24 months from now. And the only reason I put that 6 to 24 is because the Fed and our politicians are trying, the White House is trying to do whatever they can through purely fake way of increasing interest rates or, a different kind of build.
It's what they always do, folks. It's what they always do. It's all fake. It's a dog and pony show.
Back better plans, whatever they're going to be doing to put money into the system to delay this market crash and the recession that's coming. Midterms is around the corner, so it could be 6 months, it could be 12 months, it could be 24 months, but it's coming. Recession's going to probably be announced a lot sooner. It could be as soon as July. It could be as soon as Q4, but that's also coming here soon. But I'll give you some of the tools on what to do to be prepared for this. So my market crash philosophy that I follow, and I'll break it down for you exactly how this has impacted my life. Number one is every time a time like this comes, and I don't believe a time like this is going to come for another 20 to 40 years, maybe not even in my lifetime, because the perfect storm of what's going on today with how COVID came and we were asked to stay home, but money was sent home. We printed trillions of dollars of money, and a lot of it went to the rich. Some guys went from being worth $20 billion to $300 billion. Some went from being worth $1 million to $300 million. And then some of them are going to be corrected today. And then, at the same time, the inflation, gas, Ukraine, Afghanistan, there are so many different things that are hitting at the same time, 128-month economic expansion, that we're being affected by it. So
it's almost like it's planned. So this is Valuetainment. You should go check out the channel. Go find this episode specifically. I'm not going to play anymore, but I just want you to hear what he's saying, right? We're going to play a couple things real quick. And I'm going to show you a Glenn Beck clip. No, Glenn's generally, when Glenn gets into the powers that be behind the scenes, he is on point. And he always has been, even when he was on Fox years and years and years ago. I think there are other things. Obviously, he had a little TDS with Trump. He changed his mind on it. He's even apologized about it. But there are other things he has, issues with. Whatever. I don't watch a lot of Glenn Beck, but I really appreciate the Blaze and what they're doing. Just like the Daily Wire, even though I don't watch a lot of the Daily Wire. But he made a video about about Biden and his legacy as FDR. And this is very important. You need to understand this, understand the economics that are going on right now, what is about to happen. And Biden himself wants to be seen as FDR. FDR, who resided over the Great Depression, who basically kept the Depression going, economically stifled the United States for a period of a decade, and while he did it, completely radicalized and took over the government into the fascistic system that we are a part of today. How much worse do you think it will be via Biden? And mind you, when I say Biden, I'm filling in let me phrase this correctly. When I say Biden, I don't mean Joe Biden directly. I mean the people who are using him as a puppet, just like the same people that use the Clintons and Obama and the Bushes as a puppet. These people are front men. They are not the masterminds behind everything.
Tonight, I'm going to make some comparisons between Joe Biden and FDR. This is the wheelchair FDR had when he died. I bought this not because I'm a big fan of FDR, because FDR, he didn't believe in the individual. And it's ironic because I think the greatest thing about FDR was he forced himself to walk even though he had no power from his legs at all. But most people wouldn't know that. His wheelchair was hidden from the public all the time. And yet it was the guy on the other side of the water that said people who are handicapped, they're not real people. They don't have a quality of life. And so Hitler was killing them. Hitler was defeated in part by a guy in a wheelchair. That's one of the greatest stories I've ever heard. Somebody who thought he had no chance made his own.
Sorry, guys. I'm sure you can't hear it, but my daughter is in the background going, and screaming. So laughing at that. Anyways, let's keep playing.
Way. That's where my love affair with FDR ends, because FDR, despite the fact that he did the impossible, he didn't think you could do the impossible. He didn't believe in the individual, thus the large state that he gave us. What FDR gave us was really the groundwork that has allowed so many in the previous administrations to create what we're living today.
Yes, that is correct. Now, mind you, Build Back Better in the World Economic Forum was a kind of an idea that they were trying to take, like the Great Society, right, from LBJ, right after FDR, and the idea of the Green New Deal, again, is this hearkening back to FDR, right, and the New Deal. The New Deal was disastrous for America. The New Deal, well, it's called the New Deal because basically what he was saying, what he was introducing is, hey, the way that we've been doing the government, the constitutional thing, here's the New Deal. We're going to build an oligarchy and we're going to tell you how it works. That was it. And this process had happened over a long period of time. There's an interesting book. I always say that, and I want to look around. I'm like, yeah, I can't for the sake of flow. There's an interesting book called I think it's FDR, my misguided father-in-law or something like that. In any case, it's let me see if I can find it real quick for just a quick Google search. FDR, my exploited father-in-law. That's what it's called. So the book talks about from the perspective of one of his son-in-laws, talks about the businessman that co-opted the government through FDR and all of that. Now, I don't think that that his son-in-law is quite being fully honest, because I think FDR had plans for a lot of this stuff, but it's hard to say. Even Wilson, their memoirs of Wilson, where he said he regretted some of the things, and he was co-opted by the businessmen. And then I always like to remind everyone of the coup that Smedley Butler thwarted, the Marine general and veterans advocate after the First World War. He thwarted a takeover of the government. It completely went away, was never investigated, and those people, they took over the government. I mean, it's what happened. And they're all into, the propaganda and the control and the communism and enriching themselves. And they're Malthusian and they're psychopaths. You have to be to look at other human beings and think that they're just cattle.
And if you think FDR was bad, wait until you see what is coming. Because Joe Biden is not the next FDR. Joe Biden is in a category all by himself.
Special.
That quote is far from the only
relationships, the ability of all people of all kinds to live together and work together in the same world at peace.
That quote is far from the only aspect President Biden borrowed from FDR. Both men led America with their head in the clouds, with wishful thinking that did, and that is now taking America into a very different and dangerous place. Joe Biden has purposefully positioned himself to become a modern-day FDR, and if he succeeds, our nation may never be the same again. To understand Biden, you first have to really understand FDR. So tonight, I take you back in time to the Roosevelt era, showing you the similarities between both commanders-in-chief and for the destruction their policy agendas could bring to America today. Tonight, fascist fantasies, the dangerous origins of Biden's takeover.
So we're just going to watch a couple minutes of this, guys, to kind of introduce the ideas. Of course, I could talk about it and whatever, get a bunch of articles up, all that kind of stuff. I have some stuff to talk about, though, directly and specifically about this and to show you. And some other takes that were 100% correct about it. And I'm seeing this a lot where people are starting to get it. They're starting to pinpoint it. People that have been doing this stuff for a long time, and they're being more brazen in what they say. And I really think that in explaining this as a synthetic society really pinpoints it, because again, expanding upon that thought is the fact that not only is it fake, is it manufactured, but it is literally it is schizophrenic, as in it's disjointed and disconnected with reality, and it is a synthesis of ideas, as in Hegel and his dialectic, and that we're actually taking ideas that are conflicting and competing, and we're amalgamating them together into a singular thing. And when you are in conflict with yourself, with your conflict with reality, you are going to have severe emotional problems, severe mental health problems. You cannot operate as a functioning, strong individual when you are fake. And so they are synthesizing these people. And just like this quote, or this, let's see, where's that? Just like this right here from Violence is Life, it says, Salty showed a tweet from a leftoid NPC that pretty much admitted that they just do what the TV tells them instead of thinking for themselves. Right. That's a hackable person. You might have heard that recently, that the hackable person thing. In fact, let me just get that up because I can do that real quick. Oh, I already moved the memes from the show the other week, but that's all right. I have it in another folder. Oh man, this is killing me. Why can't I find this? There it is. Let's just play this.
Yes, when we are sitting here, we have an implant in our brains, and I can immediately feel, because you all will have implants, and we measure your brain waves, and I can immediately tell you how the people react, or I can feel how the people react to you.
Humans are now hackable animals. You know, the whole idea that humans have, you know, they have this soul or spirit and they have free will and nobody knows what's happening inside me. So whatever I choose, whether in the election or whether in the supermarket, this is my free will, that's over. Free will, that's over. That's over. Over. Today, we have the technology to hack human beings on a massive scale. Yeah, I mean, everything is being digitalized. Everything is being monitored. In this time of crisis, you have to follow science. It's often said that you should never allow a good crisis to go to waste, because a crisis is an opportunity to also do good reforms that in normal times people will never agree to. But in a crisis, you see, we have no chance. So let's do it.
Yuval Harari, folks, that is Klaus Schwab's right-hand man. You're a hackable human being. You have no free will. We're going to program you. Oh, it's sick. It is quite sick. It is demented. Let's get back to the Glenn Beck video. I have some more.
Hello,
stuff
America.
From
the Standing Rock Ranch, one of my barns on our ranch in Idaho. Welcome to the Glenn Beck program. I want to talk to you about something I never understood, even with my grandparents. FDR is like everybody's favorite. Worship him endlessly if you've ever called yourself a Democrat. Why? Well, it's because FDR lived the ultimate progressive dream, and he was elected president 4 times.
Yes. And it's like I said, too. It is the mythos, the myth of who he is, the cult of personality of who he is. And we very well know that it was his wife running the show behind the scenes, but or at least largely influential to him and his policies and whatever else. But it's like this guy I used to shoot pool with, Jack. Jack is a really nice guy. He's a really good guy, but he grew up during the Depression, and if you talked anything bad about FDR ever in front of him, he would not have it. Because FDR saved his life, which is absolutely absurd. FDR did not save his life. He made his life worse for years.
What is the line in the
as
music?
Well as everyone else.
The man's a gall-darn spellbinder. He was. He remade America. He remade the executive branch with a buffet of offices and new powers. What would you like? Maybe a little of this and that. And he got to reach into every aspect of American life with 87 government programs that were part of his New Deal. Democrats still are like, oh, New Deal, oh, it's magic, isn't it? I'm telling you, FDR spent more money than any other president in U.S. history. On FDR's watch,
Hey, I got Strippy over here. Hey, Strippy, I feel bad for you. Your base of life around and force upon others the views of a fictitious book. No, you. It's some projection. I mean, you could pretend that the Bible isn't true, but it continually is proven correct. But aside from that, I don't preach violence. In fact, I preach peace. It says, you are the epitome of ignorance. I'm actually the opposite of that. It's like when you call me not smart the other week or stupid or whatever. It's like, that's obviously not true to anyone and everyone who meets me. I'm not the smartest guy. I'm not a genius. I know I don't have a genius level IQ. But, you know, aside, Strippy, I don't know why you come in here. Like, just to leave your comments, because I find them funny. So if you want to continue to entertain me, that would be great. But I don't know how your belief system that supposedly you believe, because I don't think you're actually a genuine person. I think you're just part of the synthetic society and you're trying to have fun and get a rise, or you are completely narcissistic and think that that having weird statements like that don't make any sense in any sort of context surrounding this show or myself is somehow some sort of power play. I don't know. I really don't know. It's just it is like absolutely absurd. But sure, I'm the ignorant one. Sure.
national debt increased 1,048%. One historian who wrote a book about FDR's infamous first 100 days said President Biden is on track now to spend at least 10 times that much after adjusting for inflation. After adjusting.
Yeah, I think you're right there, Dahari. It's like I mean, I've literally, and I don't like talking about it like a lot because I don't want to sound arrogant. I don't want to be arrogant. I don't want to come off that way. But I've literally had people ask me many a times, "What do you do? Are you a doctor? Are you this or like meeting somebody having a like dinner thing?" And I'm like, no, I'm just a lowly blue collar worker. But I have my reasons. I would rather expend intellectual energy on the things that I wish to expend them on than for somebody else, like some sort of cow or slave. So I direct those things to God, and then I work in harmony and peace with people and blue collar work, and I take care of people, man. I'm a shepherd. That's what Christ has called me to be. So, and it is, I hate bullies, and it's if you are a poor leader, I am going to let you know. I'll put it that way. Anyways, back to the show.
For inflation. All right, so there's a reason why Joe Biden and FDR have this in common, and it's because Biden is a live action plaything. He's role playing FDR. Don't be surprised if all of a sudden, you see him with one of those fedoras and that. I mean, it's coming. Biden's FDR fantasy started as soon as he cleared Bernie Sanders out of the way during the 2020 presidential election. I don't know if it started with him or the handlers or whoever's really calling the shots on all this stuff, convincing him you're going to be the next FDR. Biden and his advisors began closely studying FDR's presidency as a model to follow. Biden even reportedly read books about FDR's first 100 days. And it didn't take long for the Democrats and the media to get on board with this Biden as FDR narrative. Think about what they are covering for Joe Biden and his son. Is it any bigger than the president's actually in a wheelchair and can't walk that most Americans didn't know because the press just didn't report it? Even the guy Biden has just knocked out of the race jumped on the bandwagon. Do you remember this?
The compromise that they came up with, if implemented, will make Biden the most progressive president since FDR.
Okay. Throughout the rest of the campaign, Biden marketed himself as the next FDR. In an interview with The New Yorker, he said, quote, "I'm kind of in a position that FDR was." What, in fact, FDR did was not ideological. It was just completely practical. Well, Biden's presidency has already proved the exact opposite. What he does is completely ideological and totally impractical. You're feeling that every time you go to the gas station or the grocery store. Just 1 week before the 2020 election, Biden...
Yeah, I kind of feel the same way. I'm not going to, I mean, if it's totally disruptive, I might have to ban somebody, but I'm not going to kick somebody out because I don't even know what's going on. I mean, I think that he likes the show, but then likes to, to secretly watch it. Maybe he is a real person. Maybe he's a real gay man who secretly hates himself and loves this show. I don't know.
Left his basement to give a rare campaign speech in Warm Springs, Georgia. Now that seems random until you realize that was the location of the polio treatment facility where FDR used to stay for extended periods. That wheelchair that I showed you, that was the wheelchair he died in there at Warm Springs. He had a house there and a girlfriend, but the press never reported that either. Biden hoped for the FDR vibes and hoped that they would rub off on him and hypnotize America. Watch.
In the years that followed, FDR would come back to Warm Springs often to think about how to heal the nation and the world. And that's exactly what he did. Lifting us out of a Great Depression.
No, he didn't. He kept us there.
Defeating tyranny. Saving democracy. Warm Springs.
Didn't save any democracy. Your oligarchy is not democracy.
Is a reminder that though broken, each of us can be healed. That as a people and a country, we can overcome this devastating virus. That we can heal a suffering world. And yes, we can restore our soul and save our country.
That's a guy who wants to be thought of as a god. Look at all the things I can heal and restore and whatever else. Except for he's not a god. He's a scumbag. He's a real bad guy. In fact, go watch the rest of this later. Like I said, I didn't want to play too much of it. I just want to, like I said, guys, I tell you all the time, I'm more of an aggregate than anything. And I'm building the show around what I want to talk about, but the things I see, and you guys can go investigate it, right? Go look it up, go question. Yeah, let's keep going on to, let's move on to how Joe Biden's not a good guy.
Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson's Happy Friday. We're going to bring you back to a story that we covered at the time, but whose significance we didn't fully understand then. And it's definitely worth revisiting. So just before dawn on November 4th of last year, a team of masked FBI agents wearing bulletproof vests showed up at the home of a journalist who works for the investigative media company Project Veritas. They pounded on his door. They said they have a warrant. Let us in. We know what happened because it was all captured on camera. Here it is.
I'm sorry, so what is this regarding?
This is the search warrant. Open up.
Let me see your hands, sir. Let me see your hands. My hands, sir.
So there's another team coming up? Yeah. So maybe we'll split up into like areas of the house.
Let me see your hands. Let me see your hands. It was serious. They had weapons. They barged in. They went through the whole place. They tore the journalist's home apart. There's another team coming, they said. And they were right. 2 days later, feds hit the home of Project Veritas founder James O'Keefe in Westchester County. So why were the FBI coming to the homes of employees at Project Veritas? What did they do? Were they Involved in a human smuggling ring? Were they bringing fentanyl in from China and killing more Americans? No. The FBI believed that Project Veritas was in possession of or had information about a diary written by Joe Biden's daughter, Ashley Biden. The FBI claimed that diary had been stolen. We now know the FBI knew that diary had not been stolen, and it wasn't. But as James O'Keefe pointed out at the time, and didn't have enough people hear him when he said it, what if it was stolen? Having a stolen diary is not a federal crime. So what in that diary was so important that Joe Biden sent FBI agents to get it back? Here's what O'Keefe said.
The tipsters indicated that the diary included explosive allegations against then-candidate Joe Biden. The tipsters indicated that they were negotiating with a different media outlet for the payment of monies for the diary. We attempted to return the diary to an attorney representing Ms. Biden, but that attorney refused to authenticate it. Project Veritas gave the diary to law enforcement to ensure it could be returned to its rightful owner. We never published it. Now, Ms. Biden's father's Department of Justice, specifically the United States Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York, appears to be investigating the situation, claiming the diary was stolen. We don't know if it was, but it begs the question. In what world is the alleged theft of a diary investigated by the president's FBI and his Department of Justice a diary?
So everyone in American media hates James O'Keefe because he covers them. So they
This is an important point too. All the media outlets that selectively edit all the time, all of their interviews to the point where they interview people and make gotcha moments by selectively editing, and the people in the background or the people that they're interviewing actually have released the true and full interviews before. We've seen this numerous times, and they're saying that Project Veritas is selectively editing. This isn't true. It's not true at all. I know James. I don't know him that well, but I'm telling you right now, guys, he is very serious about getting the truth out there. It is like all he thinks about. He is obsessed. He would not and he's a very holds himself to a high standard of integrity. You know, James didn't release this diary for good reason. They could have, but they didn't. They would have had an exclusive, but they didn't, because he is a man of high integrity.
ignored this story, and they never answered the question. But the question hangs in the air, and it's a real one, and we're quoting. In what world is the alleged theft of a diary investigated by the FBI? Why were they doing this? Well, the answer lies in what's in the diary. And now we know what's in the diary, thanks to a new piece in the Daily News, which has a copy of the diary. Josh Boswell is a reporter there at the Daily Mail. He broke this story, and he joins us with the answer.
Hi, Tucker.
Josh, thanks so much for coming on. What is this about?
So we've looked at the diary. We've spent a lot of time considering carefully what to report from it. And what we've chosen to report are some pretty serious things that Ashley, the president's daughter, wrote. She wrote that she was musing over whether her father was sexually inappropriate with her when she was a little girl. She mentions in the diary showers with her dad. She also talks about them being probably not appropriate. She writes that down on one page in her diary. And she also refers to being hypersexualized at a young age. There's a lot of references in the diary to her repeated spells in rehab, her relapses with drug abuse, alcohol, and sex addiction as well. And
that is that. You guys can go find the rest of the video. Project Veritas released this. This is, of course, Tucker's monologue segment from Friday night. Now, what's important here? Well, his daughter, he did very inappropriate behaviors with. Now, we know we have Hunter Biden's laptop as well. Obviously, these aren't very bright people. They're very foolish. I know Joe Biden's not an intelligent person. He never has been. He's a plagiarizer. You don't plagiarize if you are intelligent enough to create something unique that makes you a standout. He has been a middle of the pack, middle of the road, keep with the herd guy his entire life. And that's the exact guy that they want at the forefront, because unlike Obama, who's dynamic and inspiring, it's just a guy that they can put out in the front and go, well, why do we care about him? He's a throwaway. He's a throwaway, and he can take all the blame. He doesn't even know what's going on right now because he's demented. I mean, Joe Biden was taking showers with his daughter when his daughter was old enough to remember. That's a problem. You might take a bath with your parents because children don't usually take showers until they're a little bit older, right? But that's a problem. We know that Hunter was sending text messages to his dad about things, about porn. We know that Hunter has said stuff about sleeping together, like in the family, like some weird stuff, like with his niece. And what does that do? Well, she says she's been sexually promiscuous. Why? Well, I don't know. Maybe from sexual trauma, because that's what it does. It makes you a prude or a slut. When you sexualize a child, that's what it does. And it shatters their world. Drugs, rehab, all that. Why would she need all of that stuff if Joe Biden was any sort of good man, barring, the trauma of his wife dying and that kind of stuff? But I don't. Is this the? I don't know the exact whose kid is what kid, whatever. I know Hunter was with his first wife. I don't know if does he have any kids with Jill. I don't recall. But this is weird stuff, right? And it points to his character because, I mean, his character is it's garbage. It is absolute garbage. It's all about enriching himself. That's obvious. We know he is embedded into scandal, but people don't listen. They don't pay attention, right? Well, here, let's look at this.
With today's numbers, the jobs over the last 3 months have averaged about 400,000 jobs per month. That's historically robust and a sign we're beginning to shift to steady growth after rapidly recovering 600,000 jobs per month over the prior 6 months. And as we move to a new period of stable, steady growth, we should expect to see more moderation. We aren't likely to see the kind of blockbuster job reports month after month like we had over this past year. But that's a good thing. That's a sign of a healthy economy.
No.
With steady growth, rising wages for working families, everyday costs easing up, and shrinking the deficit. That stability puts us in a strong position to tackle what is clearly a problem, inflation. I've been very clear that fighting inflation is my top economic priority.
Bruh.
So, one, Biden doesn't control inflation in any way, shape, or form, and no president ever does or has, because that's not how it works. The Federal Reserve does, and they are a private entity. And until we boot them out, until we get back to a gold standard, to the constitutional standard, it's always going to be like that. So, here we have from the New York Post, why Team Biden might be purposely grinding down the middle class. What you say? They might purposely be doing this. Oh, imagine that. Vladimir Lenin supposedly once said, the way to crush the bourgeois is to grind them between the millstone of taxation and inflation. There's some doubt as to whether this line is genuine. Regardless, it seems like a pretty good description of what Joe Biden administration is doing to American middle class. Inflation is running rampant. The producer price index, the most useful measure of general inflation, is a whopping 16.3% from April 2021 per the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Now, when was this article? May 26th. It's an old article by by its date, but we can see not that old, right? It's recent, but it's been a couple weeks, right? That means that roughly 1 out of every $6 that people earn has become lost to inflation in a single year. Or to put it another way, 80 minutes earnings out of every 80-hour day have been eaten up. 80 minutes out of every 8-hour day, I'm sorry. So that's basically an hour and 20 minutes of your 8-hour day. You might as well have just worked 6 hours and 40 minutes. This is predictable, of course. Team Biden took an already bloated federal budget and supersized it with spending last year, printing money hand over fist to fund a massive array of pork-filled programs, many, if not most, of which glued billions of dollars into the pockets of Democrat Party supporters. Imagine that. Yeah. You think they might be purposely grinding them to a halt? I don't know. Let's ask Styx. This is one of the best videos I've seen from Styx in a long time. We're going to watch the whole thing. So I'm not taking away from the guy, but he does produce like 3 or 4 videos a day. So I think it'll be all right.
All right, everyone. We start off today talking about the...
Mind you, Styx is a great voice to listen to because Styx has a high accuracy rate. He's a very good pundit. He understands what's going on a lot better than a lot of people do, and a lot better than a lot of political YouTubers do.
Biggest Democratic Party failure in the last few years, and nobody's even putting 2 and 2 together in their analysis of the importance of this. That is specifically, link in the description, archived of course. The other day, Biden signing a bill. It was bipartisan, which is a new thing for something that actually makes sense. He signed a bill in order to provide security to the families of Supreme Court members. So while the Democrats don't want to increase the number of guards for the SCOTUS justices, they are fine with having a couple of mall cops guarding their immediate families. So children, brethren, spouses. I don't think any of them still have living parents, although I could be wrong. The average age of a SCOTUS justice is getting up there. And so they need to be guarded. What is this? Let's dig deeper. Let's not look just at the bill itself, which makes sense, of course. You've got threats constantly at this point against SCOTUS. And leftoids, in their violent, frenetic ways, they've gone far beyond just targeting like public officials. They want to yell at their kids and throw shit at their spouses and so forth. People that aren't even directly associated with public policy. It's like they're constantly rambling about Ginny Thomas there, Clarence Thomas's wife. She doesn't make policy. The fact that she made text messages to a few people in the Trump White House during the January 6th kerfuffle shouldn't matter. She's a private citizen. She's just giving her own opinions. She's not enabled to enact laws. She's not making judicial decisions. She's just the wife of someone in politics. And for a long time, I've had a problem, by the way, I will digress momentarily here, with people targeting, for no legitimate purpose, the spouses, parents in some cases, brethren, and children of public officials. You'll know years and years ago, I rose up to defend, I can't remember which Obama daughter it was. I think it was Mally Obama. She was smoking weed. She's 18 years old. She's in college. She's doing something that's not illegal in the state she was in at the time, and people were raking her over the coals for it. And I'm sitting there thinking, who gives a shit? She's not the president. She's a former president. She's not in the Senate or anything like that. Let her smoke her weed. Who cares? This happened constantly to Donald Trump's family. Melania constantly getting dragged by the legacy media. Woman speaks 4 languages. She seems like a relatively nice individual, just one that's very exasperated. If you look at the leaked phone calls with one of her former friends regarding the Christmas parties and saying, fuck the legacy media, what she was really saying is, hey, no matter what I do, they're not going to like it. They're constantly going to degrade me, and I've just had enough of it, so fuck Christmas. They tried to make it out as though she was being the Grinch.
This is all the projection, folks. This is the gaslighting and the projection, just like I was saying earlier, just like the fake news articles we were talking about. Keep this all in mind, right? And this is, it is unbelievable how stupid people are, how foolish they are, I would say, how unwise that they are, because many of these people are actually intelligent people. They can think, they just choose not to. And that's a problem. That's a huge problem. And it weakens everybody. It makes everybody in our society weaker because we don't have a level playing field in which we can discuss things. Because I'm all about the diversity of ideas. I don't have all the best ideas all the time, and neither do you. But that's why we put our heads together. It's one of the advantages of, say, being in a relationship with somebody, right? You get married and you raise a family, you have problems, and each person has their strengths and their weaknesses. I have weaknesses like, scheduling. I'm not very good at it. I'm not very good at keeping it. But my wife is better at that. So we play off of each other, right? We work together. It's a union that builds each other up, not one that tears one person down and so the other one can be risen higher. It's a building up together. And that's important because that right there shows the nature of my goals or anyone else's goals if they're bringing people up together, right? If they're working with the differences and they're coming up together. Those that would hurt others, right? Those that would make others pay the cost, the expense for their actions, they're not bringing anyone up together. That is evil. That is how you know these people are evil and psychopaths, and they're trying to psychopathologize you. Because despite what our resident troll says, I actually want to bring up all of the communities together. I want their lives to be better. But what he doesn't understand is that he actually needs to tear down your life and his mind and destroy everything in order for things to be better. In fact, it's the basis of Marxism, right? I addressed that in the beginning of the show, that you must give up all of your special privileges and special powers and special properties and be educated. I'm going to talk about education here in a minute, but the etymology of that word is quite interesting, and you should start to understand when someone says that you need to be educated, what they're telling you. But we'll get to that by the end of the show. In any case, when someone's selling you something and it's not making both people go on the upward path, but one person has to be brought low, right? They're selling you something bad. They're selling you something evil. They're selling you something destructive, manipulative. Both people should gain. It should not be one or the other. It should be both. That's what cooperation is. That's how it works. It's pretty simple. But again, we live in a schizophrenic and unbalanced society that is literally synthetic and trying to make a bunch of sociopaths so that they can have their revolution. It's pretty insane, but it's the reality.
They were talking about Barron Trump and saying, well, he looks autistic. He should be locked in a cage with pedophiles. Literal quote. I can't remember exactly which leftoid was saying that. So obviously the left, and to an extent some people on the right, think, and I think this is blatantly unacceptable, that even the minor children of politicians should be targeted in an effort to intimidate the politicians, or in this case, SCOTUS justices. Digression aside here, though, what is this actually an admission of when you're providing this extra security to not just the SCOTUS members, but their families? This is an admission that the attempt over the last few years by the Democratic Party to radicalize individuals on the left and turn them into expendable pawn shock troops effectively has worked. They've gotten so violent that it's necessary to guard people who aren't even involved with public policy. Biden effectively, by signing this bill, is admitting that his own encouragement of nonstop rioting, his own encouragement of the big lie bullshit, the idea that the United States is being overrun by insurrectionists and Nazis and the far right is coming to make you live in Handmaid's Tale. That propaganda effectively, which is almost entirely from the Dem Party or from unaffiliated leftists, has succeeded. They have radicalized a significant number of people into thinking that Trump is Adolf Hitler 2.0, only bloated, orange, and poops himself.
And they know nothing about Hitler, about Nazism, about National Socialism. They know nothing about it. It's just a slogan. It's literally sloganeering. It's like, here, say some words. Okay. Orange man bad. Orange man bad. Me too. Me too. You're not saying anything. You're saying nothing. What you're saying is that you're an NPC, that you're part of the cult, and that you obey your masters because you're a hackable person. And frankly, that makes you weak in my book. That makes you pathetic, actually.
Like a baby. It's really, there's some hyperbole there. And that the people around him are basically Nazis, and that there are millions of Americans out there who hate their fellow man and are arming up for some sort of dumbass civil war. If you're a leftist, let's say you are a CNN watcher. I know they tend to prefer MSNBC, but MSNBC is becoming irrelevant. You're listening to NPR, even, partially publicly funded. You're watching the average leftoid commentator. You're a Vouch fan or watching Hassan Piker or something. You have been convinced by a wall of propaganda now for years that the other side, the other people, the uncouth, dirty, gun-toting masses are coming for you with a noose. They're going to Jussie Smollett you, and this time it won't actually be a case of widespread fraud.
In case in point, again, in the Entropy chat, it's like completely say random things that have nothing in line with the, I don't know, hundreds of hours of streams that I've done. Consistent with anything I've ever said. Yeah. And it is a delusion. And that is the gaslighting I'm talking about. I mean, Styx was on it in this video. It's just amazing.
In such a situation, put yourself in their shoes, the shoes of people that were radicalized by the likes of AOC and Maxine Waters and all of these other morons. You think that the United States is going to be subsumed by the second NSDAP, that you're going to end up with concentration camps and women pregnant barefoot in the kitchen with no rights.
If we don't take away your guns, that's going to happen. Just like in Australia. We got COVID camps. COVID camps. Yeah, but they weren't rounding up indigenous people or anything and putting them in the concentration camps now, were they? No, it never happened. Okay, you fool.
Suffragists, gay people will be put in concentration camps, etc., etc. Think of the most hyperbolic bullshit you can think of. It's just like with Roe v. Wade. And I say this as someone who's pro-choice, and I will always point that out because sometimes people have this left-right dichotomy in mind, so they assume that if I'm making a video like this, that I must be a massive Christian traditionalist.
This, again, is part of the synthetic society, folks. The jumping to conclusions based on someone's political positions. I know that Styx Sexenhammer is an occultist. I know that he has books on the occult. I don't listen to him for that stuff, and I don't agree with him. I've heard him talk about Christianity. I don't agree with him. He's wrong. The occult is not older than Christianity. It is something that came up together. You go back far enough and you understand the metaphysics of how these people thought and where they come from, the origins. They are derived all from the same places, the beginning, and they go in different directions. And the things that the occult does is they explain things with metaphors and as allegories, and it's like, yeah, it's just like any other religion, but the difference is the endpoint. The occult worship gnosis. The occult worship Luciferianism. The Styx, I don't know if he does. He might say, oh, it's not part of it, I'm like a Wiccan kind of person. Okay, whatever. But that assuming that because he is a conservative, and he's not, he's a libertarian, but assuming that because he doesn't agree with your position is part of the synthetic society. You're not a thinking person if you automatically make those assumptions. And not everything is a binary. And as much as the left loves to say that about sex and gender, immediately, if you oppose them, everything becomes a binary. It's projection.
They don't even see my username. And so naturally, I must want women to get unplanned pregnancies from rape and have to carry it to term.
You bought some of his occult books? Okay, cool. I'm sorry, but no, but that isn't right. He's not Wiccan. I didn't say he was Wiccan. I said like a Wiccan. Like a Wiccan. Not that isn't Wiccan. I know what Wiccanism is. I have books on it. My first wife was a Wiccan, supposedly. It was more like she liked to say that she was because she's got borderline, and it was a cool thing to be. But yeah. And it's a weird phrase to phrase it, the occult worship the devil. No, Lucifer. That's not the same thing. Lucifer. And I'm only saying this to be technically correct so you understand what I'm saying. Lucifer is the name given to the light bearer. There's an old Jewish tradition that light bearer had the name Hallel. El is a name to all the angels, right? It's signifying that they're part of God and an angel. Hallel, supposedly, by ancient tradition, is Lucifer. He was the light bearer. That is used in reference to the king of Tyre and Isaiah. If you read through the occult, you read what Gnosticism is about and all that, it's about getting to that point of elevation through thought. I'm not telling you what Styx believes necessarily. I'm telling you about the occult in general. And when you come to most people in the occult, like Theosophy, which is modern occultism by H.P. Blavatsky, or Alice A. Bailey, or Aleister Crowley, or you get into Freemasonry, Lucifer is the point. It is knowledge and it is light, and they think that enlightenment and knowledge is the final goal. So again, I'm not read Styx's books. I'm not chiding him for what he wants to believe in. I don't care, honestly. But yeah. Yes. And that is I have volumes of books. I have read and I've watched so much stuff. And every time I talk to somebody who is deep in the occult and I'm like, oh, what'd you tell me about it? They're like, oh, you seem to already understand it. I'm like, okay. I had Michael Witkoff, who wrote a book on Freemasonry and the occult. Now he doesn't have it published anymore because he is a Christian now. But he was on the Ends Justify the Memes twice and said, I've addressed it with him. And he, oh yeah, no, that's right. No, that's right. So that's what I'm saying. So not to get awful too far of a tangent there, but I want you to understand what I'm saying. Be specific, specific, correct. All right, let's keep going.
When we look at the analysis of Roe v. Wade in the wake of the leak potentially ending, and we're still not 100% sure that happens, they could go with the narrow Roberts decision, which is kicking the can down the long, lonesome road anyway. What was the secondary analysis that these people gave? Did you pay attention to some of the news articles, especially from the more left wing of left-wing media? The Slates and the Voxes and the Salons and the HuffPosts. Oh, well, if they're going to do this, then next they're going to come for gay marriage. Next, they're going to come for a woman's right to vote. They're going to go after interracial.
By the way, another thing I should tell you, occult just means hidden. That's all it means. And so these people have hidden knowledge, and as you go through the levels of understanding and revelation, you begin to understand what the knowledge actually is. So that's an important thing to keep in mind, because people always think it's witchcraft and all this other stuff. Maybe, but that might be a part of it, depending on what they're doing. But it means hidden. It means there's secret initiation rites, there's secret knowledge and symbols, there's secret things. And some of the language used in the cult is actually used by the church for various reasons. Primarily that the early church had to hide a lot. But you can see the occultic influence in the church later on, because that's what people live with, and that's where Gnosticism comes from, and a Christian Gnosticism, that is what is it, the Naga Hammedam, or however you pronounce it, Dead Sea Scrolls, the Gnostic scripts, and it's what a lot of the early church was railing against. I often bring up Irenaeus's Against Heresies. He goes through a whole thing about Gnosticism and their belief systems, but there are layers. They don't just let people in. And, this is very, very old. And they're also known as the mystery schools. So
couples, miscegnation laws will come back. Can you see the logical end result of what that kind of hyperbolic analysis actually brings? It's complete blackpilling of a huge swath of the population and trying to convince them that, yes, the government was almost overthrown already, which clearly it wasn't, and so you need to get out in the streets and fight. What does that cause people to do? They think that their entire country is going to be completely upended. Yeah, damn right, some of them that are on the fringe anyway mentally are going to get violent. We saw this last week when a Supreme Court Justice, Justice Brett Kavanaugh, was nearly assassinated by a leftoid who showed up at his house. And the police didn't do anything until he called them and said he was having suicidal ideations, had a gun, and had showed up because he was pissed about the Roe leak and about constitutional carry laws. We almost ended up having a constitutional crisis already little more than a week ago. And so Biden, with this, and the House Dems, with this bill that they themselves pushed through.
Mind you, they won't protect Brett Kavanaugh, but they will go and raid a journalist's home over a journal that they legally acquired and didn't even publish. Skewed priorities, I think, a little bit, right?
And it was largely bipartisan. The Republicans wanted it anyway. They want more security for SCOTUS justices. I concur with this sentiment at this time. Biden is saying we need to use millions of dollars of taxpayer money to guard people who aren't even part of public policy. They are not in any elected position. They are not judicial in nature. They are private citizens. We have to pony up millions of dollars to guard a bunch of private citizens because the left has become so radicalized that there is a legitimate fear that people, including children in some cases, are going to get shot or stabbed or be attacked or harassed or mobbed in some way because the Democratic Party has spent the last few years radicalizing a segment of the public and telling them that the Nazis are back. That's what this boils down to. This is the biggest optics fail in the entire Biden administration's history. Yes, this is worse than Afghanistan. To be clear optically, if everyone had a clear head and was looking deeper than the bill itself, if they looked at what it actually meant, they would understand this. It's worse than Afghanistan. It's worse than Keystone. Hell, it's worse than the inflation. The government, a sitting government, including a sitting president, and their cohorts have radicalized millions of people, some of which are not mentally all there, into thinking that their republic is going to die and so they should do something about it. My lord, if you put a manifesto online from any other political position and say similar things to what Maxine Waters and even in some cases Joe Biden and his staff himself have been saying, you're going to get a visit from the FBI. Clearly you're trying to encourage other people to...
Well, violence, that's been my point. That's why I'm playing Sticks. Yeah, they're deranging the country. That's why I'm playing this, though, because he did a good job summing that up. And I'm not as I don't have as much brevity as Sticks has. I'm from the South, so. But yeah, that's the point. They're psychopathologizing people
to riot Or build bombs. Take up arms. We need to defend the Republic. If this were coming from a right-wing position and it were some Gadsden flag-wearing goofball Ness, it would be profiled and you would at least be under monitoring by the feds. By the way, time and time again, all of these violent leftoids, when they do something terrible, we find out that they were on the feds' radar to begin with. This doesn't surprise me in the least, though. It's all by design. Just like the...
Yes, he lives in the Netherlands. He just got married, so he's been living there. But he was not living there until about, well, right before COVID, I believe.
Economic damage being done by the Biden administration is not due to being naive. It's not due to being incoherent and stupid, although that certainly applies to Joe, who needs a bran muffin in order to poop, and then he needs somebody else to wipe it, because he sure as hell ain't doing it himself at this point with his brain being so scrambled. The people behind the scenes are doing it out of malevolence. It's part of the Great Reset mentality economically, and this is part of the same mentality. They want a situation where a segment of the population, shielded from prosecutorial repercussions in general, because it tends to happen in big cities that are run by the Soros DAs, they want those people to riot. They want that damage done. It's a Marxist plot to try to rip apart society. That's...
And there you have it, folks.
Really what it is. The irony is that the people that are actually hazarded, whose republic is actually being crippled...
And here's the rub of that. He's going to bring it to you right up front. It's beautiful.
By its own government are the ones that are very, very reluctant to engage in violence. Again, the right wing, the tendency is you give them a mile, they'll take an inch. They're very long suffering, perhaps too much in many cases. The leftoids, though, they just need to be told by an NPR article that gay marriage is going to go the way of the dinosaur because of Brett Kavanaugh's existence, and they'll go crazy. They'll start building pipe bombs. We're seeing it right now as we speak. This is the biggest optical fail of the Biden administration, and I wish that people would popularize this very concept, look deeper than the bill itself and its very superficial meaning, and look at the deeper meaning of what that entails. Even the government that is creating the problem has no choice but to react to the problem they themselves have created. I would further point out in
which is Hegelianism. It's part of the dialectic. It's purposeful.
Closing, this is a microcosm of the Democratic Party's dysfunction and, by the way, why they're having electoral problems. The Democratic Party is a liberal apparatus run by a bunch of rich people and investors, and yet they have continued for decades now to use the far left, to use the id poll voters as pawns in elections. They promise them everything, they give them nothing once elected, and they wonder why these people are angry perpetually. Yeah, no shit. Some of these people might have a few mental issues and might take a shot at a sitting judge. We literally had that almost happen only a short time ago. It got completely dead-ended by the media. It has been completely memory holed, and yet it's one of the most important political news stories that's happened in the last few years. And yet a lot of people barely even remember that it happened. That's about all. Peace out.
Yeah, or like the Steve Scalise shooting some years ago. But, you know, it's like if you want to find out things, you get stuff like this. This is Google. I was looking for the inflation rate being twice the rate. I had another video here. I basically cut for time's sakes. Here we have Axios in the middle of the pack. That's not true. We're not. We're much higher than the nations compared to us, and so forth. But when I first did this the other day, it didn't give me any real results. It gave me a bunch of articles from months ago, even last year. That was on my phone, but still. And then here I put in the same thing: American inflation twice the rate of Europe. U.S. and Europe have different inflation problems. Look at that. DuckDuckGo, amazing. This says in the middle of the pack, yada 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 yada. U.S. versus, I mean, there's stuff there. And of course, I did a different, those said America, I put US in here. We're on the news. UK is closing in on inflation rate with double digits. Here's a Pew article, which I have up. Is that the Pew? No, it's the Daily Wire. Here it is. But I just found it interesting, and I'm sure you guys see this stuff all the time. The difference between search results, and it might not be as apparent today, but when I first did this Friday, it was like, it was huge. It was glaring. And maybe I'll bring it up on the show because I think I might have taken screenshots on the show on Wednesday over on the Ends Justify the Memes. But yeah, from the Daily Wire has a pretty bleak. International Economic Organization issues new warning about soaring inflation and famine. And we can look into all that, I guess, another time because I need to get moving along, get out of here. I want to talk to you real quick about Educate. Let me educate you, sir. I'm going to educate you. When someone says that, they're being a complete prick. I'm just telling you right now. So from the mid-15th century in English, that is, educatum, bring up children, to train, from Latin, educatus, past participle of educare, bring up, rear, educate. Source also from the Italian, Spanish, which is frequentive of or otherwise related to educare, bring out, to lead forth, from, out of, ducere or whatever, to lead. I don't remember how to pronounce Latin, so I haven't taken a class of Latin since I was a junior in high school. So it's been a long time. So basically, the word education is the bringing or rearing up of children. X is out. Ducere is to lead out, and to bring forth. And it really means to bring up and to rear. So when they are saying, let me educate you, they are trying to rear you as if you were a child. And how apropos, because most people on the left wing are children. They aren't adults. You know? And just like Styx was talking about the way that they get these people worked up, even the news media suggest that it just wasn't working the way they'd like it. Why an energy crisis and $5 gas aren't spurring a green revolution. They thought that they were going to make people cry for green revolution by doing this. Like, this is telling. Of course, Fox has a Washington Post reporter lamented the energy crisis and high gas prices aren't spurring a green revolution. WAPO reporter bemoans the U.S. doesn't have a carbon tax. Build Back Better failed in Congress. Yeah. I did have a video about the World Economic Forum, the stuff they're putting in. But again, for the sake of time, we're at 3 hours, and I think my wife is having a hard time with the baby. So I got 2 more things I will play for you guys, and that will be it for the day. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Hopefully, you'll go back if you miss some, go watch the beginning, some of the stuff I talked about. Again, let me remind you what the World Economic Forum thinks who you are.
10 years when we are sitting here, we have an implant in our brains, and I can immediately feel, because you all will have implants, and we measure your brain waves, and I can immediately tell you how the people react, or I can feel how the people react to your.
Humans are now hackable animals. The whole idea that humans have, they have this soul or spirit and they have free will and nobody knows what's happening inside me. So whatever I choose, whether in the election or whether in the supermarket, this is my free will, that's over. Free will, that's over. That's over. Today, we have the technology to hack human beings on a massive scale. Yeah, everything is being digitalized. Everything is being monitored. In this time of crisis, you have to follow science. It's often said that you should never allow a good crisis to go to waste, because a crisis is an opportunity to also do good reforms that in normal times people will never agree to. But in a crisis, you see, we have no chance. So let's do it.
Holy evil, folks. And with that, there's a video clip from Jesse Lee Peterson and Mercado the other week. And Jesse Lee asked him straight out, why are we hating white people so much? And Nick had the proper response.
this situation. But first, two other questions, I think. Are you a Christian?
Yeah. Yes, sir.
And what do you think about the attack upon Christianity in America, in that they're trying to completely wipe it out? And one of the ways they're wiping it out is by getting rid or trying to get rid of the white Christian male in order to wipe out Christianity in America.
Oh, yeah. I mean, absolutely. The insidious nature of progressivism is that it happens so slowly on this long timeline that a lot of people don't realize they're in it, right?
Yeah.
It's like the frog in the pot with boiling water. And so we've seen steadily for the past several decades just a decline of value of Christianity, of traditionalism, the breakdown of families, and certainly the white Christian family is in the crosshairs. I mean, we hear about it every election season.
We hear about it all the time, and it's been going on for a long time, and people have been talking about it for a long time, since the 50s and 60s. G. Edward Griffin has been at it, and people say he's a conspiracy theorist. No, you're just a fool who refuses to see. You have blinders on, and you would rather worship yourself and your own narcissistic beliefs. You're not your brother's keeper, and you're not a good person. I can tell you. Being an actual a worthwhile human being requires work. It requires that you do maintain some sort of awareness of the world and what is real and what is fake. And it maintains that you yourself try to fight against those things that are evil. Not with violence, but with actions, words, how you treat people, how you lead, how you shepherd.
Oh, white evangelicals are this, they're doing this, they're responsible for that. And every one of those things is to pick it apart. And it seems like everything that hits a school board meeting these days is an antithesis of a Christian value or a Christian belief.
Sure is. It's amazing to see that happen. Why do you personally think the white evangelical Christians, preachers, and others are not making loud noise about it? They're not out there on their networks and really trying to stop it. Why is that?
Well, I think, I mean, of course you'll find instances of them doing that here and there.
Right.
You'll find preachers who are happy to address it from the pulpit. The preacher at our church has been pretty vocal lately, not on the political front, but just on the values and the Christianity aspect of it. And it's refreshing to see him standing up for it. But I think, the churches themselves are being squeezed. And when they're being squeezed, I think they get defensive and they worry that, if I say this thing, I might turn off that family, and then it's maybe one less donation or one person less in the pew.
Sup, wife? I'm almost out.
And I think they get scared of that. And the ironic thing is, I think that's what turns more people off is a lack of courage.
It is. It's impossible to believe in God, and these people are supposed to be called by God to stand there and tell the truth. Is it possible to be called by God and have fear or worry about your finance or worry about who's in your church or not?
No, I don't think it's possible to do.
If you are called by God, you will, and you listen and you answer the call, God will take care of you. There is nothing to fear.
Do it.
Yeah.
I was I attend a men's conference every February, and one of the speakers a couple years ago, he brought up, I don't remember the specific Bible verse, but he said that his model, and this really resonated with me, but his model for preaching and for life as a man was the Bible verse about standing in the gaps. There was a wall, and the wall had some holes and gaps in it. And so the men of the town stood in the gaps to fill it in, right? So that the enemy couldn't come in. And for me, that's our job, right? Like that's the most masculine thing I can think of, is to stand in the gap to protect your own, but you can't stand, you're there with no wall. So you can't do it without courage.
Yeah.
And I think what you're saying is spot on. Pastors have to be there speaking with courage, speaking into truth, and just saying, hey, I know there's people who aren't going to like this, but it doesn't matter, because you cannot like it behind me while I protect you. That's that's the role.
That's right.
And it doesn't matter. You have an obligation if you are a leader of a flock, if you're a minister or whatever, you have an obligation to your people. Christ came to serve. He came to this earth to serve, and no man is greater than his master, which means every single one of you who proclaims Christ are servants of Christ, and meaning also that you're servants of the world. That's not so that the world can abuse you, mind you, but it means that you have a role to play. There is a parable of the talents. It's something I bring up often because most of my life I had talents that I squandered, and I didn't know with my loose relationship with God what I needed to do. But once God truly called out to me and I truly repented, well, I started realizing all of my talents, and this is part of that. Now, talent was a monetary unit, right? It was a coin. But we use the word today because we understand the deeper meaning of that you have to strive and try. You cannot just go hide away in a hole and expect God to then say, okay, I guess because you were a good person, though you never interacted with anybody or did anything or helped anyone out, I guess I'm going to let you into the pearly gates. Of course, I don't believe that we go to heaven. That's a whole nother thing. But I don't know. We need better men. We need better leaders. We need better morals. And we need to understand that this society is psychopathologizing us on purpose. It is destroying everything on purpose. And it's all for neo-feudalistic, jerks, a-holes, whatever you want to call them. The people that have egos the size of Texas and basically believe that they can control and run the world. Guys, I'm going to play a video. I want you to watch as my outro today. And it's going to be different than what I normally play. So I hope you appreciate it. This has been All Minus One. My name is Bill, and I wish you all well.
Okay, guys, time for a little lesson in population control and global governance. Outside this door, there's a bunch of goats who want to storm the castle. So what do? Time for some pornography and corn syrup. So now when I open the door, and now I get to pick them off one by one. Hey, do you want a loan with that car? 2% financing. And you're stuck. Now I'm behind you. And there's your wealth. You see how control works? Very simple. Student loans, interest on your student loans. I hope all the dining hall meal plans and bisexual experiences were worth it. Because now for the rest of your life, interest on the student loans, Hey, enjoying your Hollywood entertainment up there? Interest on your student loans, You want a boat? You want a ski-doo? Hey, black goat. It's the blonde goats that are taking your milk, not me. It's the blonde goats. Now get in there. Come on, justice. Go get some justice. Black goats matter. Yeah, it's that blonde goat out there taking your milk. Now, why don't we get you a nice loan? Time for some justice. You know that it's the guard dogs that are the problem. Remember when one bit you in the ankle? Black goats matter. Yeah, just keep taking those loans. Black goats matter. Hey, Annie, that black goat that came before you got like twice as much grain over there. Yeah, didn't even pay for it either. Totally taking your grain. All right, let's get to work. Let's make America great again. Hey Gary, you know how I rubber banded off your balls so you'll never get a beard like the Three Amigos? And it's because we have enough ghosts and I'm calling the population. Well, it's because you're brave and beautiful. And your new name is Caitlin. It's because you're the good guy, not because I'm trying to limit all your population. Black Lives Matter. Make America great again. Black Lives Matter. Make America great again. Hey, Three Amigos. You guys ready to pump? Gotta get rid of them guard dogs, huh? All right, ladies and gentlemen, I hope that was very illuminating. At the end of the day, that's the only color that matters when you're a goat farmer. It's the color of your product. And in global governance, that would be green. It's just the labor, the fruit of the labor. So try and see through this psychological operations. It's really obvious when you see it. I think it's one of the tragedies behind the fact that less than 3% of the population still farms, because when you farm and you do animal husbandry, the spells are so obvious and ridiculous that, sometimes I just find myself laughing along. But fortunately, I'll be laughing with you guys at 9:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, tea time with Gary and Terry.